Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to our Vault Pro Masterclass. We are so excited to have you attending today. There's been a lot of excitement and preparation, a lot of anticipation for this class, and we are very excited to have it kick off. So we're going, as people join, we've got a very large group. We're going to go over a few things before the actual training begins. My name is April Dupree. I run the customer success team here at KETIV. Simply put, my team dedicates themselves to making sure customers get the most out of what they've got. So adoption and onboarding is very, very important to us. So we work really closely with the customers that we have. And our team is the one who sort of initiated this program that this class is actually a product of. So to give you a little bit of a background, and as most people in this training probably already know, Autodesk announced the retirement of Vault Workgroup, which is that middle tier. So we have Vault Basic, Workgroup, and Pro. So Workgroup was retired this month. And once we found that out, we decided that we wanted to meet with our customers one-on-one as quickly as we could, explain to them what this retirement meant and share what the options were for them. And once we were able to get that established and going and meet with customers, we realized because of Autodesk allowing Workgroup customers to access Vault Pro for no charge until their renewal date, we really wanted to enable these users to try out Pro and understand all of those benefits that they can use Pro for. So we decided, let's put on a free class and let's get these users in the product. Let's get them familiar with the features and really find the benefit of that. So we've got a great group of Workgroup customers, and we're really excited that we had such a great turnout with that group. But that isn't the only group we have in this training. We also have a great number of existing Vault Pro customers as well. So we realize this is a fantastic refresher course for those of you who already have Vault Pro. We've seen a lot of customers with staffing changes, and maybe it's been a little bit of time since you had your Vault Pro implemented and training on it. So we encourage customers with Vault Pro to go ahead and join for those purposes. Now, some of the features that we go over might be a little bit repetitive for Workgroup and Pro customers, but we wanted to be thorough and make sure that you have all those skills and you're using it as much as you can, because that's what our team's dedicated to, is making sure that you get the max value out of that. And we have a third group within this training, and that's our Vault Basic and no Vault users. So while these users can't follow along the training in a Vault Pro because they don't have access to one, this is a great environment to see what Pro is capable of and kind of understand those features in a really thorough way. So we're happy to have all three types in this training. We've worked really hard to make sure that we can put as much information into this class as possible. And so we're really excited that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce your instructor for today. We have Jose from our data management team here at KETIV. Many of you have probably worked with Jose in the past for our Vault data management support customers. We do complimentary Vault maintenance and upgrades throughout the year. So we do maintenances every quarter and then an upgrade as well. So Jose does many of those. The CS team schedules those and makes sure that those happen. So I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with Jose. And we really appreciate that he's going to be teaching this class today. He has an amazing understanding of the customer workflow and what it's like on that side of things. So having him teach today is a real treat. So I appreciate you being here, Jose. In addition to Jose, we also have three other expert panelists. We have Alan from Autodesk, which is really special, and we're so excited that his schedule was open enough for him to attend. Alan's been at Autodesk for a while. He's very familiar with the Vault Pro line Workgroup as well. So to have him on, amazing insight and some really good content that he'll be able to share as we go through the training. Very excited to have him join. And then, in addition to Alan, we also have Phil and Jason from our KETIV data management team. These guys are going to be throughout the whole class. So every time that Jose comes up on a topic to teach, we're going to have some panelists give some discussion around, why is this important, what we see with customers, why it matters, all of those types of things, so that you can get a better understanding of that real world application part. So I don't know how I got approval to have all of these highly trained, very high demand experts on this class, but we're really thrilled to have them join us today. So they'll be with us throughout the duration of the class. So really quickly, something that I just want to go over that many of you on this call are going to be familiar with is I want to talk about data management and how significant it is in this digital transformation age that we find ourselves in. We've got a lot of manufacturing customers who are needing to keep that competitive edge. They're needing to, cut costs, be as efficient as possible. There's a lot of different services that are available for manufacturing. KETIV, we are a gold partner with Autodesk, but we also have other companies that we work with and partner with to provide a whole variety of solutions to our customers. It's very important to us that we kind of embody all of that a manufacturer would need. So you can see here, we've got a strong CPQ portion. We have engineering, design, automation, simulation, advanced manufacturing. All of those we're very strong in. We've got amazing customer relationships with these services, but you'll notice there at the bottom that data management is the heart of it. And it truly is, because if your data is not managed well and it's not secure, it's really not going to matter what other types of technology you introduce. It's not going to be set up for success. So we've got a lot of customers that only do the design side, or they only do the manufacturing side. There's a lot of information shared between third parties. If that's not secure, if you're not, keeping backups, having revision control, those types of things, it's a lot of wasted time, a lot of hours and money that manufacturers just really can't afford right now. So KETIV, we're very dedicated to that focus within the industry, and we put a lot into that because we know how important it is. So we're very encouraged by the amount of folks that have signed up for this class, because it's telling us that manufacturers, that these companies that you're representing, see that importance, and they see that it's a key part of this whole transformation stage, and we're just really excited to invest into that even more. I want to go over with you the class agenda that we have for today. So you'll see this here. Again, I apologize, I'm not in presentation mode. It's not a mistake. It just is not working for me today. So please excuse that part. But we've got listed, we have user topics and admin topics. So we're going to go through each of these in the order that they're shown here. And like I said before, our expert panelists will have a bit of a discussion before the topics, explain why it's relevant, how it's important, how it applies. And then Jose will get into the how-to part. So he's going to be in the software quite a bit. This is an interactive training, so we will be keeping an eye on chat and the Q&A. Any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to ask. Jose is going to be dedicated to the teaching part, but we have these experts who will be keeping an eye on that. So any kind of questions, as many as you have, please ask, because this is a lot of information. And to that point, this is also being recorded and will be available in an on-demand form, but also with chapters, right? So it'll all be broken up, because we want that to be easy resource for you guys to go back and look at. We understand this is a 4-hour class, and a lot of you are still trying to do business because manufacturing never stops. So if you miss a portion of it, please don't worry about that. We will get you the on-demand information so that you can go back and view it later. Also noted here is our KETIV Virtual Academy. Many of you in this training, I know, were already registered, but I wanted to bring attention to that. Again, KETIV is very dedicated to that education side. It's a point of pride for us, and we have religiously continued to provide educational sessions every single week for years. And it's a 1-hour session that is on a variety of different topics that are relevant to the manufacturing industry. It's not just Vault Pro, there's all different types of software solutions that we go over and help you with. I believe last week was why it's important to have a CAD admin that Jason led. So really good information. There's no cost to attend. All you have to do is register. So we're going to provide the link in the chat. If you could go ahead and just click that and add your name and information, we will let you know as these come out what the topics are, so that you can choose to decide to attend the live, or you can view the on-demand later, because each of those are recorded as well. But wanted to bring that up, and if you have any questions about that, just let us know. But we'll have that available in the chat. Just click that and add your information. Lastly, many of you probably know that Autodesk University registration opened up yesterday. This is the very first year in a long stint that they're having it in person. So we're really excited. This is going to be a great event. If you've not been to Autodesk University before, it is a really unique, special experience. It's a lot of information, great chance to talk to experts and hear from them. Autodesk does an amazing job of putting that together. So it'll be in New Orleans this year in September. As you can see, anyone can sign up if you go to the Autodesk website. If you have any questions about that, we'll also be happy to help you with that. I've also noted here, KETIV will have a class at AU this year. It's going to be taught by Tom Fitzgerald, who is our lead for our automation team here at KETIV. So he's partnering with our customer Hannibal, and they're going to be partnering in a presentation to share about the design automation solution that we've been partnered with them for a while now. So you can see the products and topics that it's going to cover. Should you register, that class will be listed out so that you can see when that's happening and make sure that you get signed up for it, because it'll fill up pretty quickly. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. Again, any kind of questions that you have, please ask. We have some follow-up material we'll send to you after the training wraps up. But in the meantime, please reach out. Again, thank you for attending today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so Jose can hand it over. But one thing I wanted to note, giving your time is one of the most valuable things these days. So we don't take that lightly. And like I said, we're very committed to ensuring that this is as much information as we can possibly provide. So hope that you enjoy it. Happy to have you here, and take it away, Jose.
When you can't find the unmute button, it just moves on you. Thank you, April. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and thank you for the introduction, April. So like April mentioned, we're going to be doing Vault Professional Masterclass today. And so I'll be teaching that. I'll be getting help from Alan, Jason, and Phil today. But it'll be hands-on. I'll be doing things in Vault Professional, jumping in and out of CAD as well, just to show some things there. But we'll be going through specific topics, the ones that April mentioned, and we'll have different people introducing those as we go, as the what did Alan call it, the so what of each topic, and jumping into that. So just gonna jump in here, and then the first topic is going to be introduction to Vault Pro. So I'll let Alan go ahead and take care of that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jose and April. I am Alan Gager. I am a solution engineer with Autodesk. I have got to work with these amazing folks at KETIV over the years on both sides of the equation. I am absolutely excited to be here. I go back as a customer with Jason. He's pulled me out of some really tight spots. Phil and I have worked together as customer in Autodesk, and Jose as well. I'm really excited about the content he's put together. And the so what? Why Vault Professional? Well, for you folks that are workgroup users, I will tell you I love workgroup. I was actually using workgroup before it was a product with Autodesk, and I was thoroughly excited about it. It did everything I needed to do. And then we needed it to do just a little bit more. So from an Autodesk perspective, we continue to invest in Vault Professional, and Jose is going to show you a lot of our favorite features. And we have made it as easy and seamless as possible for you, you folks that are on Pro, or I'm sorry, on Workgroup to get to Pro. For our friends that are on Vault Basic, why Vault Professional? Well, as you'll see, as Jose takes us through, being able to actually manage your data in a more concise manner, from everything we're going to walk through, from revision management and so forth, being able to share data outside of your organization, outside of those folks that need to consume it, that don't have an Autodesk product on their desktop. Vault Professional will address all of those. And then for our friends that are also on Vault Professional, I'm pretty sure Jose is going to show you some things that that maybe you forgot are there or didn't know were there. So no more time for me. Let's kick it off. Jose's got a lot of fun stuff to show you guys. I can't wait. And then Jason and I and Phil are going to be monitoring the Q&A. So if you want to throw your questions in Q&A, we will tend to those so Jose can focus on getting all the content delivered to you today. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So jumping in here, we're gonna talking about why Autodesk Vault Professional. We're gonna set a baseline, like basic workflow within Vault, and that'll apply even to the Vault Basic customers. We'll see how it works with CAD and the benefits of Vault in general. But then we're going to jump into the engineering release process, how that looks inside of Vault, how it helps working with items, working with the bill of materials for those items, and then the change order workspace in there as well, and how that looks, what the process of going through a change order is and how it feels like. And then once things are released, once things are available, how that works with the thin client, how you access it. And going through that. So, that we'll go through that hands-on, look into that. And of course, if there are any questions or you run into any issues there, just, put it in the Q&A and then we'll have one of the experts pick it up. So jumping into the basic workflow, we're going to have Jason talk about, what that's like or the benefits of that.
Yeah, so just at a high level, one of the main benefits of the basic workflow of Vault is really the check in, check out process. It's a very completely different paradigm than using a shared drive or just working local, but it really changes the way that you collaborate in terms of, having files checked out, knowing that no one else is making changes to them, tracking the version of the file so you can see how a file changes over time, having Vault capture metadata so that you can easily find and reuse content in ways that you can't on a shared drive. And so, it takes a little bit getting used to a client server relationship in terms of downloading files to the working folder, checking them out, modifying them, and then putting them back in. But once you get our head around that, it offers you benefits in ways that a shared folder just can't.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, we're going to go ahead and jump in here into Vault. That is the wrong Vault. This is the Vault we want to see here. And you can't jump into Vault without kind of talking about how a basic explanation of what Vault is. Those of you that have worked and with Vault and are familiar with it, that you're basically looking at a window of the files that you have inside of a server. So Vault is a repository for your files. You have information about those files stored, and Vault can access all of that for you. You can search it, you can do all that kind of stuff. But this Vault client that you're seeing is basically your portal into it. You can search it and find them, but essentially what you end up doing is you download these files locally and work on these files locally. Like Jason mentioned, you have to get used to that relationship of downloading the files, working on them locally, and then uploading those changes. So we're going to start off here is basically where everyone starts off when they log in or when they open up Vault. You'll have a login screen here. There's different types of Vault accounts that you can use depending on the environment that has been set up by your Vault administrator. There you may have a different option to select here. Typically, a Vault account is the ones that are used. Those are specific to Vault. So, a lot of times when we set up these usernames, it'll be first initial, last name. That way, amongst the users in the company, it's very easy to distinguish who made these changes. What's nice is the password you can set is personal to you. You can control the password, but don't have to worry about, being locked out. Your administrator will be able to go into Vault and actually, reset your password for you. You've been out of the office for a couple of weeks, and you don't remember what the password was, or if you reset it recently and it's not working, right? And then, like Jason mentioned, you'll be downloading files. You'll be downloading files from a server that's hosted either on premise for your company that all your users have access to, or in the case like of our VOS customers or Vault as a Service customers, we host servers in the cloud that are accessible to all your users. So that server will have a name or will have an IP address that you can access through. So you'll type that into server, and then what's nice is once you have that server name right or the IP address right, you don't really have to remember this Vault name here. You can actually search for the vaults that are available for you here. So mine is very, very uncreative. It's just Vault. But once you have all this information correctly, you just go ahead and hit OK and log in. Or if you don't want to have to worry about filling it out every time, putting in your password, you're the only person on this computer kind of thing, you can have it automatically log in when you open up Vault next time. So just going to go ahead and hit OK here. And typically when you come in, you'll be in home. So this is typically what you'll see here. You'll have many different workspaces that you'll have access to. Project Explorer is what I like to call where your files live. So this is where your folder structure exists. This is where, when you're going from a network drive, when you're going from a shared drive, you have a folder structure that you're used to. We try to mimic that folder structure in this Project Explorer location to make sure that, users are going from an environment that they're used to another environment that they're kind of familiar with as well. So on the other hand, though, if the way that your folders are structured now, we know isn't the best way that you want to keep track of your files, we can use this opportunity to kind of switch that up, solidify and fortify your folder structure to make sure that projects are being kept this way, products are being kept this way. It's kind of a part of the discussion that we have when we deploy this, when we implement this. So you can make those decisions at the time. A lot of the times, we get a lot of our customers together from different divisions, different portions, and the discussion happens where, well, we do it this way, we do it this way. What way do we want to do it? Kind of get the consensus going, and then decide, this is the best way that we want to move forward. Again, we have the folder structure in here. We can pretty much dig through this and find our files. And like I mentioned, there's metadata on these files. There's these lifecycle states that we'll get to in a bit, as well as properties. So like you'll see here, when I click on this, there is a properties pane here. Our Vault Basic customers, you won't see that properties pane. It's not an option in Vault Basic, but you could, in Vault Pro, you'll be able to not only create your own metadata. So if there's custom information that you need, it'll be here. But you'll be able to view it at a quick glance, at a quick click. As you switch back and forth between files, you'll be able to see those. I did mention searching. So this is, like I said, if you're familiar with the folder structure, you can quickly get to your models. They're easily labeled. You'll get to the right place. But if you're at the very top or you're new to the folder structure, you're a recent hire, there's a couple ways you can find things. So there's a quick search up here. You can, if I'm trying to find those car seats, I can find that assembly here really quickly. Or if I'm trying to do a more in-depth find, there is the find tool up here. So, Control F or the button will lead you to a more advanced search. And with those properties, whether you have a project number, whether you have a die number, whether you have, a part number, things like that. These are all searchable within Vault. Again, if you're new to it and somebody tells you, use manufacturing number 123, you can add that criteria. And then I only want to see the drawings. We can go to file extension and say, I only want the IDWs, right? You can add that criteria. What's nice about this find tool is it's an and, not an or. So you can make your searches as specific as you want with that. And it'll only give you the results that fit that description. Of course, you can change the conditions as to, is will make it more explicit as opposed to contains, which will, if it's anywhere in that value, it'll find it. But be careful with setting criteria because the more criteria you set, the narrower the results. And if it doesn't match any files, like you see here, you won't get any results on that. But find tools, very, very, excuse me, very, very useful tool. What you can also do is, or one of the ones that we always tell our customers is checked out by. So checked out by contains administrator, since that's who I'm logged in here. If I add this, by now, I don't have anything checked out, but I can save the search. And we'll go over what checking in and checking out does and how it works. But check out by me. And we'll save it as a folder, and you'll see that they'll save it on the left-hand side here and make this search very easily accessible whenever I need it. So if I say, yep, save it here, you'll see that the checked out by me save search is here. So if I close this, I can easily get to this save search. The other thing you can do is, let's say state or revision isn't something that is important to you, I guess. The reason I say that is for work in progress, you can set these icons in 2023. So if you don't want to see the actual state name, you can go ahead and actually get rid of this. So you can customize the view. If there are more important fields or pieces of information that you would rather see, so like if you want to see the description, you can add this in here and then place it in your view. So the closer it is to the top of this list, the further left it is. So you can move this to just right of that vault status. So if I hit OK here, you'll see that it adds a column for description. These views can be customized and saved inside of a vault. So you can create new views in here to use throughout the folders to give you that information that you need. So, like I said, if there's any questions that come in or anything like that, just go ahead and put them into chat. But we're going to talk about, like Jason mentioned, checking in and checking out. Checking in and checking out, exactly like it sounds. It's kind of weird thinking about it now because the example I tend to use is a library, but I just realized like a lot of the things are now available digitally. So I don't even know if checking in and checking out is a thing for libraries anymore. But you're doing a reservation on, like in the library, a book, right? So when you physically take a book from the library, you're the one that has possession of it and responsibility of it. Same thing inside of Vault. When you do a check out of a file, like I am here of this Inventor project that's inside of my Vault, you'll see that it changes colors here and it has a blue tint to it. And you'll also see that the properties updated here on that file that says it's checked out by the administrator. So now, if I go to that save search, that file gets added to it. This is one of those useful cases. At the end of the day, you're making sure that all the files that you checked out during that day or during that week are checked back into Vault. You can use this save search to do that. But essentially, I have access to this file. If I were to log in as a different user, if I were one of your colleagues or anything like that, and I'm looking at this IPJ, to them it would look gray and with a strike through. That means it's unavailable for editing somebody else has that permission right now. They would be able to know exactly who by looking at the property. They're still able to see that, but they would need to request either, that you check it in, or it allows for that opportunity to go in and say, well, I thought I had to edit it today, or I need to make some changes. Why do you have it checked out? It kind of allows for that conversation to start. But you're able to make changes to it when you have the reservation of it. Once you're done making changes locally, that's what this icon is right here. Actually, now they're talking about it. This icon will let you know that you have it locally, which is what this get function is actually about. So, you're able to make these changes. You're able to make these changes in Inventor, AutoCAD, pretty much any of the CAD tools that work with Vault, as well as any Office software as well. So Word, Excel, they all have Vault add-ins enabled in them. They'll be able to interact with the Vault, check them out, make your edits inside of Word, inside of Excel, check them back into Vault. Once you check them back into Vault, it's recommended that you do it through the CAD tool that you're working on. And the reason that you want to do that is because Vault keeps track of all the relationships within the file. So if you're working with assemblies, we've all run into the issue where you move apart, right? You move apart within the folder. Next time you open up the assembly, it kind of freaks out. It's, hey, brings up a window. It's like, I can't find this file. At that point, you have to kind of navigate to the new location of that file and tell it, well, it lives here. Inventor fixes that relationship. So next time it opens up, it knows to look in the new location. You don't have to worry about that inside of Vault, because when you move the file within these folder structures, Vault keeps track of that relationship and it corrects it. So that next time Inventor tries to open it up, again, it'll look in the new location, make sure that local copy is there. But when you check it in, I'm going to go ahead and just do a check-in here. You can always add comments as to what has been modified inside of the file, and then they will appear inside of the new version. So it's going to yell at me here. The IPJ itself is being used inside of Inventor, so it's not going to let me check it in. And again, it's an Inventor file. We want to make sure that we check it in through Inventor. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to undo a checkout, which again, what this does is I checked out a file. I don't want to make changes to it anymore, or the changes that I made, I don't want to keep. This will put the file back into Vault the way that it was when I checked it out. And I have the option of replacing the copies that I have locally with the one from the Vault, or just ultimately deleting the copies that I have locally. So I'm going to go ahead and just undo my checkout. It undoes my reservation, and you'll see that it no longer is checked out by me. How this looks inside of Inventor and AutoCAD. So if I have a new file here that I want to check out, I can go ahead and open up a part. Again, I want to make use of a Vault project inside of Inventor. You'll know that you're not using a Vault project within Inventor when you log into Vault and all of your buttons are grayed out. Back when I was on support, this would be one of the major things that would happen. Sometimes, Inventor sometimes resets your project back to default, or you're working on a new project. They would try to check in, customer would try to check in a file, and all of their buttons would be grayed out here. So inside of Inventor, I'm creating a new file. It doesn't exist yet. I don't have it saved. I don't have it in any of the locations, but I have it locally. Like I said, when working with Vault, you're working with a local file. So you want to make sure that you're saving it in the right location first. So I'm going to go back to my Vault here, and I want to save it in a new folder. So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to create a new folder inside of my designs folder. Doesn't exist in Vault, doesn't exist locally either, but I'm going to call it Vault Masterclass. and that's where I want to save this file. But again, if this folder I just created it, it doesn't exist locally, what I can do is actually right click on it and then go to the working folder. The working folder is, your local workspace, your C drive usually for a lot of our customers. It can be hard coded for all users to be working in the same directory. But this folder, I want to make sure that it exists inside of my C drive so that when I save this new file, it goes into the right location. So when I go to my working folder, what it does is it opens up a file explorer and it creates that relative path inside of my C drive so that I can save files to it. So now when I go back into Inventor and I try to save this file, I can go into Vault Masterclass. That folder exists now and give it a name that I want. Vault Master Part, save this. And now when I check it in through here, you can always double check that it's going into the right location inside of your vault. It gives you that option here. And I can give it a comment as to, what happened this time that I checked it in, whether you made, the types of changes that you made. In this case, it's the initial load. And upload it into Vault. Now, if I come in here and check my Vault client, if I do a quick refresh here, we'll see the new part that got added in here. And it's in the right location that we wanted it to. But once it's in here, you could do all the things we were talking about as far as manipulating the metadata that's in there and the information that's available of it. So last thing I want to cover here, just as a quick, the baseline is copy design. The reason I want to go over copy design is because it's a little different from our basic Vault customers. So if I go to my favorite assembly here, the car seat, and I want to work on something similar to the car seat, it may have some identical components, but there's some things that I want to change. I can use copy design to create a new assembly that I can modify, change the configuration and such without affecting the original one. So what I can do here is actually right click on the assembly I want to change. If it's a sub-assembly that I want to make a modification to, I can select that, but I'm going to go to the top level here and right click, and then there's an option to copy design. What that does is it gives me all of the assemblies and sub-assemblies that it's a part of. And you can actually pick and choose in here what you want to keep and what you want to make a copy of. So if I want to make a copy of the whole assembly, I can say copy branch 2, which will give me the option to send it to a different folder, completely new folder structure, separate from the original, or copy branch will give me the option to create a copy locally. So they'll be in the same folder. Maybe they're the same project. I'm just creating different configurations. I have that option there. The other thing you can do here is if you have certain parts that you want to change in your copy when you're making this copy design, you can actually find and replace them within the assembly and say, well, every place that I'm using this part, I want to try it with this part instead. It gives you the option to actually search and replace with, or that would be for naming here. What's nice is if I do a copy branch, it gives me an option here or it gives me a list of all of the files that I'll be making a copy of. Right here, you'll see that by default, the numbering or the naming convention that we use is it adds copy of. You can change it if you have your own numbering schemes. Inside of Vault, you can kind of create a smart numbering convention here to use. And you'll be able to use that when doing a copy. but by default, like I said, you can pick and choose here what you'll use, and then you have the option of replacing within the assembly if there's a different part that you want it to use. But again, for our customers that have repeat configurations or minor changes in some of their configurations, this is a great tool that they end up using. And as far as basic workflow, that's Vault Basic, Vault Professional. This is kind of how you would work inside of it. It's the basic configuration that we would work here. So I'm gonna come back here and just basic workflow that we have. I want to see if there's any questions in the chat that we can answer. If not, then I'll go ahead and move on to the next topic here. All right. And then we have the engineering release process. So I'll let Alan give us a little breakdown on that.
Okay, thank you. Love that first session, Jose. Engineering release process. So for our basic friends, you today have check-in and check-out of files, which creates versions. Our work group friends and our pro friends, we have the engineering release process in which we call lifecycle states. These now become milestone states, and there's a fair amount of control that we can put over the files with these lifecycle states. So if we think about the so what on that, we can do things like preventing people now from making changes to a drawing that don't get a revision bump. And we can also start restricting what files people can access based on the state of the file, which Jose is going to talk about. Just gives a lot more flexibility and control over your data. So for our work group friends, this isn't going to change too much. But if you're not using it, pay attention, because this is really the meat of Vault. I think it's probably one of the most important components of Workgroup and Pro. So our Workgroup friends that are using it, that move over into Pro, this is probably a great refresher to look at some of the things that are involved and what you can do. And for our basic friends, yeah, hugely important. This is actually why I put Workgroup in at the company I was at back in 2009, before it was a product, is all about lifecycle states and engineering release. So back over to you, Jose.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Alan. So like Alan mentioned, oops, let's go back, spoiled it there. So we're going to talk about the life cycles at this point, engineering release process. So that'll be the different states that files can be in. So you'll see here that I have in my assembly files at different kind of states here. You'll have the work in progress, for review, and released files in here. And those are the states that that Alan was talking about, where they'll be editable for certain people. They'll even be, you can even make them only viewable by certain people at certain states. And one of the things we like to talk about when we're talking about life cycles is how flexible it is. So these work in progress, for review, release states, those are all kind of standard states that come with Vault. You can use them out of pretty easily when you start configuring Vault. You add your users, you add what they can do at each state, and then you can go, or you can create it from scratch. Maybe you don't use work in progress. Maybe you want to change the nomenclature to WIP. For review is in review, things like that. Or even additional states. It has to be manufacturing approval, assembly approval, things like that. You want to add those states in here, you can go ahead and do that. And it's, I would say, the most customizable part of Vault Professional. You can use it with your files, like you can see here, or you can use it with items, which we'll talk about in a bit down the line here. But when you're working with files in life cycles, a lot of times what you'll be doing is if it's in work in progress, you'll be sending it into review, which then makes it available to a certain group of people. As administrator that I'm logged in here, I have access to a lot of these files. But if I were to sign in as ed engineer or one of my big company's employees, the view that they see, what they're able to do in it will be different. So let's see. If I log out here and I'll log in as, let's say, buddy Eric, I'll be able to go to these files and I should see different. Looks like I gave Eric all the power as well. So let's find somebody that we can make changes to. But when working in these lifecycle states, like I said, it's very flexible. The other thing you can do is you can create required properties. So a lot of the things you'll see here are pretty well set up for the properties that they need. But the ones that aren't, you'll see a little red tag here, or a tag with a little red button. If I click on that file and then look at the properties that it has, you'll see that one of the properties that's required isn't filled out. You can actually set up stage gates, or your company will set up stage gates where this file can't move forward in the release process until it has all the required properties. That's one of the biggest things that we like to configure too. Description, all the files that you're creating, all the files that are added to the vault should have a description. You should know what they are or what they're for. That way they can either be found inside of the vault by searching, or they're, if you do have a smart numbering going on, that they're able to be found a different way other than just by their number. So by setting these required properties, when you try to send it forward, it should stop me. So if I try to send it here into review, it'll pop up a window. So let's say I'm just working as a regular engineer. I'm trying to get these car seats approved, get these car seats reviewed. I'm trying to send the assembly, but it'll pop up a window. It'll stop me. That's, again, one of the great benefits of Vault Professional. You're able to pick when it can go forward. And in this case, when I try to go forward, it's saying, hey, some of the properties don't match. It won't tell me exactly which ones, but it'll tell me that there are properties that aren't either filled out, or inside of Vault Professional, you can also have properties with certain lists of values inside of it. So if someone adds a value that isn't part of the list, or it gets uploaded from the file, that'll also cause a mismatch. It'll say, hey, this property doesn't match any of the list, any of the options for this property. Go ahead and resolve that before it can move forward. So if I come in here and I modify this property, masterclass car seat, give it that description, you'll see that this property itself is mapped to the description inside of the actual assembly file, so that when I open this up in Inventor, it'll have that description filled in. Now that I updated that description, you'll see that the tag went away. It's compliant. So if I were to come in here and change the state to review, it'll go ahead and let me. You'll see that now that it's in review, this file itself is locked. And that means I can't check it out. So if I were to check it out here, nothing happens. This is what happens to, to ensure that the file is being reviewed. But the file is the same for everyone that's reviewing it, right? Last thing you want to do is submit your assembly to review. Our people that are checking it look at it, and there's changes to it. Somebody else went in after you checked it in, after you made your review. Somebody else went in and made changes. That's not something you want to deal with. That's not something you want to have to worry about. So when putting things into review here, it'll lock that file, make sure that, hey, the last time it was modified was, let's see, it would be July 13th. That's the last time it was a work in progress. I edited some properties. That's pretty much what it did before it went into review, right? You can always keep track of it. That's another thing about Vault. It keeps track of the history. You can always backtrack and say, well, I made this modification on July 13th. Here's the proof I made the edit. So, you can keep track of that. This would then, go be reviewed by certain people, make sure that, it's the engineering is sound, the model looks good, things like that before they would come inside of Vault and change the state to released. Once it's approved, it goes into a release state, and this again will have some. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about this in a bit. So released will have some things that once a file is in a release state, we will have some other options of displaying it or showing it. Primarily in the thin client, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is another thing that we can do during our stage gates. I'm trying to release the car seats as an assembly. You notice that I put only the assembly inside of the review process. So only the assembly file. I didn't grab any of the children underneath it or put them into release or into review, sorry. This is also a check you can set in here. When I try to release the top level assembly, it checks to make sure that any of the sub-assemblies are released as well, or being released at the same time. It's able to do that. If I were to grab all the children of the top level assembly and put them all into review and then put them all into released, it would allow me to release it. So if I change the state here, you have an option to include all the dependents. You'll see here that it grabs all of our files. And you'll notice that, we'll have states in different, we'll have files in different states here. You can always filter by the states that you want to see. So if you want to see only the work in progress ones, or the ones that it can go into, so for review, you can do that in here. It'll kind of filter it out for you, which is actually a newer feature in 2023. The other thing you'll notice is a yellow band up here. So this yellow band will stop me from releasing things in mass here. The reason for it is it notices that files aren't the latest. So if files are being modified and they weren't updated in the assembly before it was released, it'll let you know. The way that it does that is, let me clear this here. You'll see some files here have a little triangle, and it'll tell you that these are not the latest. That means we have to go into the assemblies to make sure, open it up in Inventor, do an update on the file in the assembly to make sure that we have the latest one, and then check the assembly back in. Kind of make sure that, as we're releasing these models, we have the latest version of that file in the released assembly as we go through. Why is this important? As far as the lifecycle, it was mentioned when it was introduced, revision control, right? So we're going to go with a part just because parts are easier to release here without having to update certain things. I'm going to go ahead and put this into review, and then put this into release. You may have noticed that I have the options here of going from work in progress straight to released. In your typical environment as an engineer, you won't have that option. You want to make sure that certain, that files are reviewed before they are released. So a lot of engineers, typically what they'll see is just a work in progress to review option. These released and obsolete states won't be available. They'll only be able to send it back and forth, which is what you want, right? If it goes into review and something gets discovered that needs to be modified, you want to make sure that users can, the very same users can put it back work in progress, make those changes, and then put it back into review. Kind of, you don't want to create a bottleneck there of who can lock and unlocking in the review process. But we're going to send this file to released. You'll see here that it's released at revision A. But some time passes, a customer comes back and says, hey, that back member on the right side, I need to make this modification to it, or I need it to fit in this location as well. Well, the very same back member could be modified. Again, if we could do a copy design of it, create a copy that's identical and create a brand new part number, or if we're going to revise the part, we can go ahead and change the state, put it into work in progress. And once it goes into work in progress, you'll see that it automatically bumps the revision. So now you don't have to keep track of that revision. You don't have to manually change it in the documentation and your drawings, things like that. Vault takes care of that revision for you. When you're looking at the history, you're able to kind of keep track of when it was put back into work in progress to be modified. And kind of Vault keeps track of these release states, so that even if they're certain versions are deleted, the release versions will always be protected and available. So released, revision, stage gates, properties, a lot of these things all work together. On the engineering side, you'll be making these state changes. You'll be working through the process. A lot of the times, once it's in work in progress, you'll do a lot of checking in and checking out. You're making the modification in Inventor. You're making throughout the days. But then once you're done making the modifications, what you end up doing is changing the state and putting it into review, and kind of letting the process itself take hold there. So going in here, talk about again the customizable workflow, required properties, stage gates, file locking. All of these are big things within the release process. Making sure that it fits how your company works. A lot of the times, again, that's one of the biggest things. Guys on the panel, anything I'm missing? Anything you guys want to touch on as far as life cycles? No? All right.
Yeah, just real quick, Jose, it's a lot of questions going on here, so kind of focused on there. Just real quick, did you touch on the security state under the life cycle? If you did, I may have missed that.
The security.
Yeah, so if we go back to admin options, lifecycle states.
Okay. And some of that we might end up touching. So
probably in the admin sections. Okay.
Yeah. So like as far as configuring, sorry. Let me go ahead and move this. So
yeah, you are correct. My bad. I think we are catching on that in the admin section.
We'll go more in depth as far as, and what Alan's touching on is all the different options we have in life cycles, as far as security, things, and how these states interact with each other. But we'll go more into those options in a bit. And we talked about it a little bit with required properties and such. This can all be set on the back end with certain criteria in there.
Hey, Jose, can you cover a quick change?
Yeah. So let's go back and let's talk about this one here. So let's say quick change is, let's put this in released again. Quick change is a state usually that's reserved for certain people, sometimes admin groups, sometimes power users inside of Vault. And the way that it's used typically, I would say not for models themselves. I would say mostly for IDWs. So, or drawings specifically, DWGs as well. And that state is used for things that, I would say clerical errors, things that need to change on the model that don't change the form, fit, or function of the model, typos, things like that. And what that does is it makes the file editable again without bumping the revision. So this will go into quick change. It'll keep it at revision B, but it can be checked out now. So if I come in here and check this file out, I can make changes to it, make edits. Again, issues in the title block, things like that, typos, information that's missing can be added in quick change, modification made, and then checked back into Vault. Once it's back into Vault, again, typically when you check it into Vault, when it's in quick change, you want to add a comment saying this was missing, added it, property missing, things like that. So that way you can keep track of it. But once it's inside of Vault again, let's check out here. Once it's inside of Vault again, you can skip kind of the review process and make sure that and put it directly back into release. It's a powerful tool, but it's also very dangerous, which is why it's usually limited to certain users, power users, or administrators that can make the change. What I've seen done is, one of your Vault administrators will have access to this state or be able to make this change. So typically, if something needs to go into quick change, they'll make the modification to quick change once they deem the change necessary or valid. And then they'll review the change once it's made and put it back into released as well. Once it's in released, again, it'll go back into B, or it'll stay at B at released, and you're able to kind of keep it locked at that point. All right.
Thanks, Jose.
Yeah, no problem. Any questions we want to take care of right now with life cycles? Anything? Again, those of you that have taken Vault classes in the past, it can get a little long here with Vault Pro or Vault Basic. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask them. We'll go ahead and take care of you guys. All right. Let's come back and I think pretty quickly just review what we went over in the first portion there. Just the basic that baseline that we talked about with Vault, checking in, checking out, available in Vault Basic and Vault Pro. Allowing you to, have version control, be able to keep track of all those changes that you're making. Every time you check in and check out, it creates a new version. You're able to view an older version if you ever want to, see the changes that were made, keep those differences and view them, checking in, checking out, keeping that version history. But then also, keeping revision history like we went over with the life cycles. You're able to keep track of those revisions, when they're released, when they're approved, be able to maintain those and be able to view them whenever you need to, as well as when being able to track when those were released, when those were approved there. Next here, we're going to talk about items. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide here and have Jason give us a little bit, some words on why working with items is important.
Yeah, so items give you a lot of options. The first one, the obvious one, is just getting that bill material data into Vault out of Inventor and being able to really leverage the bill material and see it without having to open up the assembly. It gives you a lot of options in terms of quantities and starting to get more metadata that you haven't been able to see easily. The other thing to remember about items, think of them as containers, and so they hold references to the files that correspond with items. So, it adds a little more complexity because now you're managing file names and part numbers, and those usually all match and are also the item number. The other benefit from items is, when you're trying to decide between file-based lifecycle and item-based lifecycle is, the first thing is, do you need the bill of material? if you don't, maybe you don't need items. The other thing that comes to mind is, if you have aspirations, in your 3-5 year plan to link Vault or PDM with a PLM or ERP system, there's a good chance that you link those two systems with items. And so if that is part of your plan, items makes that a lot easier. And then you're setting yourself up down the road. And it, as most of you have probably already heard, it always goes back to clean data. Having correct item numbers, makes that process easier when the time comes.
Yeah, definitely. Clean data is ideal, but so we don't always have that luxury. But hopefully, with this training class and some guidance, we can help a lot of our customers get to that point where they're working with data that they like, and it's easier to help them expand. But yeah, items, like Jason mentioned, I like to think of them as containers. That's usually how we like to explain them. But they live in their own little world here called the item master. So kept mine blank just so we can work here. But typically when working with items, you're working with a part number. And this part number is that piece of tape that you put on your container that says Christmas things, right? Specifically, Christmas things are kept in this container. That's how you would look at that part number on this container. You could have a model in there. Typically you do. If that model has a drawing associated, typically it's in there. And then you can always keep other things related to this part number. Are there build instructions? Are there PDFs that are related to it? All these things that are related to this part number can be stored in this item. And it's nice and bundled for you. So, it'll give you a nice list of these things inside the item, and you're always able to find it by part number. So again, when talking about items, they live in this item master, but they still use our files inside of our Project Explorer. So we're gonna go to my favorite assembly, the car seat. And what I can do here is actually add it to an item. Something to keep in mind here, and I think it came up in one of the questions or something along those lines, is these files have lifecycle states associated to them. So right now, this one's in review. Some parts are in release. And Jason touched on it as well. When you're initially working with Vault and you're adding files and you're kind of mapping out your workflow, you want to make that decision of whether or not you want to apply your lifecycle states to the files like they are right here, or whether you want to use the item master. The reason you want to do that is because the states will apply to the files themselves if you are using a file lifecycle, or if you're using items and item lifecycles, it will also apply permissions. So if you can already kind of see that if you have files being locked by the lifecycles in the Project Explorer, they might not be editable when you add them to an item. And it also has, even though it's in work in progress, the item, the file itself may have different permissions. So you want to make that decision early. You want to make that decision before you start adding files and creating rules, which we'll look at during the admin side. Again, because of issues where right now this one's in for review. So if I add it to an item, it'll go ahead and kind of conflict with permissions here. So let's look at a different assembly. That's libraries. We're going to go to workspaces. And this one's a little easier. This one's all in work in progress. So, we won't really have any conflicting permissions here. So when I right click on this file, I can go ahead and assign/update item. And to understand what that is again, going back to this container metaphor, assigning is the first time you put these files in the container. Now you labeled the container, it created an item from it, and you know what's in there. Update is a couple months later, you open it up, and you're like, oh, this file, I want to update it with a newer version of these lights. I want to update it with a newer version of these decorations, kind of thing. It updates the files to the latest one that has been modified. And that's what this button does. The first time if there is no item associated to it, as you can, which you can tell by the icon on the right-hand side here, if it's linked to an item, it'll have a little square window thing here. If it's not, like these files aren't, you'll see that it is blank. So the first time that you assign, again, it creates that container for you, it creates an item with that part number. The second time, it pretty much updates all the files inside that container. And you'll see here, there's only one version of this assembly inside of my vault. And we'll see how that changes when we make modifications to the item. So what I'll do here is I will go ahead and assign an item to this assembly. I'll go through its process here. And you'll see here that it's gathering up item data. What that means is, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the next section, but if it has a bill of materials, if it has all information related to the item itself, it'll go ahead and gather all that stuff for you when creating the item. So this is the window that you'll get when you create an item here. Again, you can have certain properties associated to this item. Again, you get to create those and assign those as you go. The other thing you'll notice is inside of the item itself, it'll categorize it for you. So if this case, I created the item from an assembly, so it'll add it to the assembly category. Each category may have different information related to it as we go. So, those are all things configurable on the admin side. Your Vault admin or your Vault manager or CAD manager will be able to set those and keep track of those and modify them as you go. You'll see that we'll go a little bit more into bill of materials in a bit, but it gathers all that information for you. But going into the general tab here, you'll see that it assigned the model itself to this item here. It doesn't have a drawing that I've created from it, so it didn't automatically add this here, but I can add different attachments. I can add different links in here. If there is a relative PDF that I need to add to this part number, or in this case, there's an Excel sheet here that's related to this part number, I can go ahead and add that as a link. It'll add as a secondary link here if I open it. And you'll see here that there's a difference between primary and secondary associated files. It differentiates between what's the main link on this part number and then what could be associated here. Any changes to the lifecycle status here will affect both. So this is in work in progress. So the expectation here is, even though this file was added to a item, because the item is in work in progress, the file itself is still editable. Just like we were looking with lifecycle states on the files themselves, once this item changes into review or into release, what we're expecting to see is these files to be locked as well. On the other hand, if we want to go ahead and add an attachment instead, these are files that can be added and linked to this or attached to this item that won't be controlled by the lifecycle state. So again, this could be a common file between multiple part numbers or just something that you want to be viewable in multiple items. You can add it as an attachment and make sure that it's available to anybody else that's viewing this item. Again, you want to make sure that you have a description, and these properties, like we mentioned in the first portion, can be made required before they move forward in the review process. As part of your stage gate. What's nice also is you have an option, and we'll look at that in the configuration portion, but all of these items that you're seeing here are being created at the same time. So even parts, sub-assemblies that are part of this assembly will be created in our item master. And you'll see that when I hit save, it'll create these items in my item master and it'll keep it as a flat list. So that's one of the things with items here. If I close out of this now and go back to my vault, if I go into my item master here, you'll see that I have a long list of items now. All of them created from parts and subassemblies that are inside of that jet engine. And you'll see that each item here, I can always sort them by the type of item that it is, keep all my assemblies together, all my parts together, and then we have some purchased ones as well. So it's able to assign those and keep track of those for you. You know, maybe your purchase parts need to automatically be released, you know, when they get created inside of your item master. You can do that. You can set that up. Maybe they have a simpler release process. Maybe it just goes from work in progress to release each time kind of thing. You can set that up inside of your vault. As a user, you don't have to worry about actually setting it up. Somebody else will have the discussion with your CAD manager, your vault administrator, and your company as a whole to make sure that this is kind of set up to begin with, for users to just come in, get trained, and start using the tool as intended. So we're looking at the item itself here. And if we look at, let's look at a part here. You can always look at a part inside of the item. So this is the core. If I wanted to see more information on this file or actually check it out, see where it is in my folder structure, I can right click on the file, and then there's an option, nifty option here to go to folder. And that'll take me to the Project Explorer where it is. So you'll see here, while working with items, I want to make sure that actually I should be able to do this here. Let's do this. They're all editable, so I'm going to go ahead and make these not be work in progress. So let's go ahead, and that way it doesn't confuse anyone, doesn't make any issues here. So everything here is being controlled by the item. You'll see here that this jet engine is editable. There's no lock next to it, and I can make changes to it. One thing we were looking here was core. So you'll notice that now there's two versions of it, right? I made a change to it. I also want to make sure that I have a description on here. I'm going to go ahead and make that edit. IPT. You know, better practice for everyone is this is a generic part inside my vault. In your instance or in your parts, there'll be more differences between your IPTs and your parts. Make sure that your descriptions, you know, as precise as possible. You want to make sure that you can, you know, find it inside the vault with certain keywords or certain dimensions. Maybe you want to make sure that your description is pretty useful there. So make changes to my part here. Description got updated. You'll see that I have 3 versions of this part now. If I go back to my item master and I go back to this core, well, let me show that first. So you can get to the file from the item master. You can also get to the item. So go to item will take you to the item inside the item master. So you can go back and forth, which is a nice thing. The other thing here is that I wanted to highlight is this item will always reference version 1 until I update it. So that's the nice thing about items is if I go to the history, you know, there's only one version right now. It's the first one that I created. It's the first time that I made changes to it. There's no reason to come into the item master and have it update every time you make a change to the file, right? It's not something you want to keep track of on the item side. It's not something that's important. Maybe you make, you know, 20, 30 modifications to this core throughout the weeks, and you know, you don't want to capture that on the item side. It's not really important. On the file side, yeah, you want to keep track of all those changes, but the item itself, you know, you kind of want it to wait. You kind of want it to update when you want it to update. So again, if we look at the file that it's referencing, it is referencing version 1. It doesn't know that we made any changes. I did make changes though, and I want those to reflect within the item. So what I can do is I can right click and hit update, which again, what it does any files that are linked to the item, it'll go out and get the latest versions of it and create a new version of the item. So I can do that from the item master itself, or I can do it from the file. So again, like I mentioned, the first time we hit this assign update item, it'll go ahead and create the item. The second time it'll update. So if I click that now, it goes through again, checks all relationships to make sure that everything's all right. And you'll see that it will now reference version 3 inside of that item. So I can go ahead and save this. It'll create a new version inside of the item. So you'll see here again. And again, that stops you from, this could be all the way up to 20, 30, like I mentioned, but you'll only have 2 item history entries inside of the item. The other thing I want to take a look at here is if I add let's add an attachment here. Let's add this as an attachment. Again, it's not linked, it won't be locked, but if I save this here, should be able to go back and forth. So let's say if I go to version 2, inside under this revision tab here, I'll see that at some point I didn't have that file linked. Maybe it didn't exist, maybe I hadn't linked it yet, but you can always take a look at the differences of these items as they're created. You can keep track of that. And that's something that we'll go over in bill of materials. It's important because, maybe you have revision A of an assembly of an item. It was released for a customer, they bought it at revision A. What were the parts at? What revision was everything at when it was initially released? You can take a look at that through the bill of materials tab and if needed, build it to that revision structure. But now that it's updated on this end, I can go ahead and close it. I saved it. Go back to the item here. Like we did with the files, if I wanted to start releasing this core part, I can go ahead and say in review, hit this here. And then if I go to the file, let me double check something here. Sorry about that. We should have seen a lock come up. So if I go to the life cycles, and again, you can separate these life cycles based on categories, but let's check security. Oh, in review. Yeah. So, and that's something to keep in mind here when you're deploying these life cycles. You want to make sure that you're testing them, right? When you go through these here, you want to make sure that you're applying these permissions to the files if it's in items. So that's an option down here. We'll go over it during admin. You want to make sure that if there are certain people like an admin that you want to make edits for certain reason in a review state, you can go ahead and add them in here. You want to make sure that when you deploy them, you kind of put these files through the ringer and make sure that it applies properly. So in here, you'll notice that even though I made the modification in the item lifecycle, it's still not, the item itself, I won't be able to update it. It's locked. It'll yell at me, but the file itself is not locked yet. And that's because even though we make modifications to the life cycles, it won't apply those permissions to the file until the next time it goes into work in progress, into that state. So in this case, if I put it back into work in progress here, again, we won't see any changes inside of the file, but the second time we go into review, we should see that file lock up. I hit OK here and then go to this folder. Now we see that locking permission applied to the item. So again, you're making the decision up front. You're still controlling your files, right? You're still creating those stage gates. It's just as flexible. It's the same process you can create when you're working with items. But the only difference is, that additional step, that additional functionality that you get from item master. You have to make that decision up front whether or not you want to use it. We've had customers that go from file life cycles to item life cycles. It does take a little bit of work to get there, but a lot of the times, like Jason mentioned, if you're linking it to an outside software, PLM, ERP, things like that, working with item master and that type of information and being able to export it works and helps a lot. Clean data, making sure that you're working with this with a nice clean list of information as opposed to the folder structure that you're working with. So so now again, these stage gates all apply to items in this case, but if the item is locked, the file is locked, you can set that up to go here. The other thing is I don't have anything, any property compliance set up here, or any properties assigned to these categories that would stop me. But if description needs to be filled out, if there are certain pieces of information, manufacturing number that you want available or need to be filled out for your parts, you can do that as well. It has that same capability as the file life cycles. The other thing is, if this manufacturing number, if you want it to be picked up from the file, let's say it's an I property, you can also link those to automatically fill in based on the value that the file has and grab it in there. File locking there. But yeah, that's items. Again, it's doesn't add much in the form of steps to work with, but the possibilities that you have with it after you're working with it are very, very helpful and have a lot of potential. So pretty much what we covered: assigning files. You can do it from the file explorer, for the project explorer, sorry. If you have an assembly, if you click at the top level of the assembly, it'll grab all the children that can be changed if necessary, but more often than not, that's how you want it. You want to make sure that it includes all the files that are associated to it. Required properties, like I said, you can set those up within the category. You can set those up within items and the properties themselves, whether or not they're required. And that will make property compliance. If it's not filled in and your life cycles say, hey, all properties must be valid or filled in, it'll create those stage gates. It'll stop you from moving forward without the necessary information. Again, it's one of the things we talk about, like, hey, what's one of the things that bothers you the most when you're working inside of files or Vault that isn't controlled? People look at descriptions and you can't find it. There is no description. People forget to fill it in. People don't worry about that I property. So once it starts being required, people don't have a choice. Sometimes, unfortunately, that's the only way you can get them to fill those in. And it'll help you with your release process. Getting it down, at being in the industry, like, notice when it gets down to document control, when it gets down to the manufacturing floor and things like that, if there's things that are missing, information that's missing, it'll always come back. So why not ensure that it's there the first time? Creating stage gates, creating these required properties. Why not ensure that it's there first before it gets down to somebody else that has to tell you, hey, it's missing these pieces of information? And then file locking. Again, we're talking about review process. You want to make sure that everyone's viewing the same files, everybody's viewing the same drawings. Just lock the files, make sure that nobody else is making modifications to it. It's able to control those things. Once it's released, you want to make sure that nobody can make modifications to it. If there are clerical errors or things like that, the quick change state is also available inside for items. All those states can be the same. You can have that clerical changing state available. But just before we move on to bill of materials here, anything else that you guys think are good with items or would like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate how important it is to really pick one, whether it's file life cycle or item life cycle, it's definitely recommended to pick one. Technically, you could do both, but you're really just adding extra clicks and not getting much value.
Yeah, a lot of the times, and we have some scenarios where a mixed environment is required, not for the whole vault, maybe for a certain area of the vault, like certain file types. We have mixed environments, file life cycles, but also assigned to items. But it, that's I guess the recommended workflow for those files. But in 99% of the scenarios, pick one. And yeah.
Yeah, I would say I just absolutely. So our friends that are on basic moving into pro, because you don't have lifecycle states in basic, you don't have that structure set up. It's really easy to kind of start from scratch and then pick a direction. For our friends that are in work group, moving into pro, now you have an option. I will tell you that I lived the large majority of my design life in a file-centric environment. I would absolutely highly recommend, if you are moving from work group into pro, or you're in pro and you're curious about items, that you book some time with Jose or Jason to sit down and kind of look at what you're doing, what your outcomes are, and then help you figure out the best way to go and set it up. Because there's a fair amount of configuration and the choices that you make matter. And you really absolutely should do that with some experienced help, because as they both mentioned, there's a lot of some extra picks and clicks that you don't need, workflows. Just sit down with the guys and go through it and let them get you in the right direction if you're going to items. And there's lots of reasons to go to items, which the next is bill of materials, I think. Yes. So this is kind of where magic sauce is, the so what. So if we're using Autodesk Mechanical, or we're using Autodesk Electrical, or Autodesk Inventor, that bill of materials, being able to grab that CAD bill of material and turn it into what we might call a manufacturing bill of material, or those extra things that we're not going to model. A lot of power here. So items understand Inventor part files, so the different states. So whether it's a phantom component, or if it is a inseparable, or gosh, there's like 4 of them now in Inventor. But bill of materials, not having to retype all that stuff, not having to do an export out of your Inventor parts list to try and then copy paste it into Excel into something else. We have it all right here in Vault, and huge reason to use items right here is the bill of materials.
Yeah, and we've had some instances where, the right call is to go to items, but there's some pushback, there's some hesitation on going to it. And just on, like Alan said, just on having to figure out a way to get the information from Inventor out onto Excel, modify it, make sure that it's correct, kind of thing, that all adds an element of human error, right? None of us are perfect. We've all fat fingered something. We've all mistyped something. So you add that element when working with items and bill of materials. It'll grab all that structure. It'll grab all those files for you and kind of create that item master bill of materials for you. So if we look inside of Vault, and we've created this, again, this was empty. This was all brand spanking new. These are all items that I created. If we look at the top level assembly here, that jet engine model, and we look at the bill of materials for it, you'll see all the structure that's in here. Right, you'll see all the information that you expect from a bill of materials, the quantity, the level that it's at, and such. So all of this, you don't have to worry about manually typing into an Excel sheet and going through drawings or double checking the structure. It's all been created and rolled up for you. So you don't even have to worry about those things here. You can see the bill of materials in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and update my assembly here. And again, when I update an assembly or an item here, it goes through and makes sure that it has all of the latest versions of all things. Again, we made some changes to that jet engine. I removed the work in progress state, so it created a new version. When I did the update here, it did the same thing here for the file. If we look at the bill of materials, again, it's structured in here. You can go ahead and make changes to it. One of the things that you have options of here is you can turn off rows, like if that's something that you don't want to be exported or included into your bill of materials. You can choose that which rows are turned on or off. At the same time, if you're looking at a different bill of materials, for each revision, you can go back and forth. This is the option that I was talking about earlier. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to close out of this. Yes, I'm not going to save any, or I'm going to save my changes here. But if I change the state of everything here to review, should be fine with all my items here. And you notice that, it brought, when I'm releasing things, it brought all the items themselves into this change state option. I included dependents. I'm going to release everything. The reason I want to do this is, let's see what, double check here. I believe the files themselves are not compliant. So what I will do is I can't make modifications to it here again, because if I go to the file, again, we have all the things related to items as part of are locked here, right? So we can't make modifications to it. So what we'll do is go back to the item, change the state, and then we'll put things back in work in progress. Okay. So again, it gave me an error saying, hey, your properties aren't in compliance. Go ahead and change that. So what we're going to do is go back to the folder and make modifications here. So nice thing I can do here is actually select all of these. There is a limit to how many files you can modify at the same time, but this is a pretty small batch of files, and I can make the modifications as I go, right? So again, someone updating these properties will have an understanding of what each file is, and give a better description. For sake of time, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to actually make all the descriptions a masterclass example, right? So if I do this, what I can actually do is select this and apply it to all my files. That's one of the nice things in here is, maybe not for description, for other properties that may be similar as you're modifying them. The property edit window kind of acts like an Excel sheet, so you can quickly make that all the same across. I'm going to go ahead and make modifications here, and we'll see that once all the descriptions are filled out, we should see these property compliance tags go away, which should let us release it. While we're waiting for that to happen, inside of the bill of materials tab, what we'll see is you'll see all the bill of materials at the current revision that they're at. So even though things aren't, even if changes are made to an item and it's not currently released, the item master will show you the current revision level of all the things in that bill of materials. So we'll see how that's important in a bit. I'm gonna go ahead and release this and everything's gonna be at A, right? So now that we have all the property compliances, we're gonna go ahead and put this in review. Oh, and that's something also to keep in mind, right? If I'm trying to release something and it knows that I've made changes to it, it knows that, hey, version 2 isn't the latest one, it's gonna stop me. So instead, what I have to do is actually update the item, and that'll again grab all the relationships, it'll grab all the items in there and make sure that it's using the latest version of that file. So it goes through here, version 3, again, we made that property edit. I'm gonna go ahead and save it, and it'll do that for all the files as well. So it should, in this case, let me make the changes. So if I say in review here, it puts everything in review. And now that it's property compliant, I should be able to release it as well. Which file? Let's see, it's not telling me anything here as far as compliancy. Oh, let's check. That's one of the things that, you know, we can look during see during configuration. So let's see, we're using item release process, edit from review into released. Aha, so I had made this change recently. You can, if you're working with, if your revision scheme changes from, you know, alpha to numeric at some point during your revision or release process, you can make that a requirement there. I had a requirement that made it so that it had to be in a numeric revision before it gets released. So that's good to see that it was working. Since everything's in alpha, it was kind of failing there. So instead, what we're going to do is get rid of that requirement and release all things here, which we should let us do now. So now everything's in release, right? If we look at our build materials for this jet engine, everything is in revision A. We go back to our favorite part here, the core, and change the state of that. When we change it to work in progress, it automatically bumped the revision, the item revision to B. So now if we look at the jet engine here and expand this, the core will be in here somewhere. Let's open this here to have a better view. You should be able to expand all. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And in here, we should see one of them, this core item here at B, right? So even though this item is released, it's showing us the latest revision of our items as they live and breathe in our environment, right? Well, let's say you want to watch, you want to see exactly how it was when it was released. You can click on this drop down here and it'll show you the different versions of the bill of materials as they were created. So if I go to that released one and I scroll down, you'll see that my core, when this file was released on 7/13, was at revision A. And that's one of the benefits here. Again, as you create more revisions of the bill of materials, as you create more versions of this item, you can always look back at your bill of materials and see it how it was. You can always, and then again, you want to, if you want to save this bill of materials or export it, you can always export this as well. There should be an option here. Oh, once I exit. Oops. So if I open this again, we want to see the bill of materials here. You can expand everything. But once you expand everything, you can actually bomb export here. And it'll send all the things that you currently have. Again, this is the latest one, but if I want to send the release one, which has the revision A in here, I can go ahead and do that from the bill of materials tab. I can go ahead and hit BOM export. Again, it'll show me the list of things that it's going to send, and you have different options here as to what you want to do. You want a CSV, which is typically, that Excel format. You can go ahead and do that, or the BOM indicators, you can go ahead and change that. What this helps with, again, is with in some scenarios when you're integrating this to ERP or PLM, some ERP systems have a watch folder. So that watch folder will look for new files, and typically they are in CSV format or tab separated values kind of thing. You can export this bill of materials to that watch folder, have your ERP system automatically pick it up and import it into a new revision or a new version of the BOM in your ERP system. So you can go ahead and use this function for that once it's released. The other thing you could do here again is the different types of bill of materials you can have. So if you only want the first levels, or if you want the parts list, similar to how Inventor handles that, you can go ahead and use these formats and again export those as you go. Other nice thing here is similar to Inventor, similar to the file function. You can see where each item is used. In this case, this is the top level. So it's not being used anywhere else, but if you were to look at any other part, you could see which assembly it's used and its parent assemblies from there as well. So that's something to keep in mind when working with these. I'm gonna open it to Jason or Alan. Anything you want to add on bill of materials? Anything you think we should go over here that I might have missed?
No, I think the biggest point, Jose, that you touched on is, if we're going to connect Vault to a third-party system, it's really the bill of materials that's getting changed. So that third-party system can be anything, can be SAP, can be Fusion 360 Manage, whatever. It's that the item is that container that Jose mentioned, that is the currency, that's the vehicle of currency, how we exchange information from Vault into third party, and the bill of materials really is the vehicle for doing that. So no, I think you did a great job covering all we can do there with items.
Yeah, and it's gonna, go ahead.
I just want to add something, because you're building on this, your items and bill of materials, and we haven't really talked about the importance of how you could leverage this into your ERP system and how that could have a big ROI on your business. As far as, because right now a lot of companies probably take this bill of materials and they have somebody else that's entering it manually into their ERP system. That fingering happens, you have extra staff doing this work. Linking your Vault to your ERP to have this automatically push the bill of materials into your ERP can be a huge benefit to a company. And that's why you set up items, and that's why you get the bill of materials, so you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, the other thing to remember with the bill of material is that, as we saw previously, you can link properties from Inventor to files, from files to items. And, two use cases that come to mind is, if you wanted the weight of a part to show up on the bill of material, so that rolls up and gives you a pretty close to accurate weight of your assembly. The other thing that I've seen quite a lot, if you have like extruded pipes or wires or, quantities, the bill of material starts to add interesting features that if you track that metadata and it gets saved in a property and that property gets added to the bill of material, you can start getting the bill of material to do calculations for you to help make it easier for purchasing down the line to know whether it's quantities of how many things to purchase, whether it's metadata on purchase parts in terms of vendors and vendor specific part numbers. There's a lot of flexibility in the bill of material to help automate certain tasks.
Yeah, to follow up on that, like Jason was mentioning, like under quantity here, you can set the unit that each item gets. So if it's a length, if it's a, you know, if the standard measurement is different, it'll roll that up. So, you know, each time that it's used, if it needs a certain length, it'll all roll that up. Instead of 30 each, it'll give you the total length that it needs. So that's one of the big benefits there, depending on how your file needs to be included in the bill of materials. Going here, just again, it works very well with Inventor. It's able to grab those different types of entries in that bill of materials, whether it be phantom, it won't include it, whether it needs to be you know, one solid piece. If it's individual parts, it'll add it to the bill of materials area as needed or as viewed in the bill of materials. You can have the required properties in there. I didn't touch on it, but I can now. You can change the different information, again, pieces of information. You can change that view to add different types of information inside your bill of materials that are needed. There's specific notes that are required for each line item. You can go ahead and do that, customize that view. Again, we talked about stage gates. As files are released, you create different protected views of your bill of materials. We saw that, you know, we released our jet engine at revision A. Everything else was revision A as well. And it showed us the latest view. So, you know, once I moved that core to revision B, it showed us, hey, this is the updated bump. This is what it looks like now. But if I wanted to see revision A when it was released, I could go right back to it and see that bill of materials, export that, what have you, send it to a customer, do things like that. I can always do that, and it'll give you those protected things with stage gates. And again, falls back on file locking. If you know, if a bill of materials is released at that state, you'll know that those files were locked at that version or at that revision. One other thing you can do is, as you look at a file and you look at a different version of this file, you'll see that, you know, if I wanted to see this jet engine when it was released at A, right? I know that it's version 3. I can go to the folder. And I can specifically look at that version. So I don't have it turned on here, but I can really quickly, if I add that version field, right? And I like to have it all the way on the left. I can look specifically at that version when it was released, right? I know this is version 3. I know this is the one that was released with that item. I can always open this up if I wanted to see, you know, if I look at an item and it's like, oh, it's version 2 of it, I can go look at that one as well. Items will always let me know which version, you know, was used at what time inside of the bill of materials. So again, you know, it's very easy to go back and forth and work with that. We're going to go ahead and close out of here. And then the next thing we're going to talk about here is managing change. So it's going to be the change order workspace, how that works, how that looks, and how it works with items and files. So Jason?
Yeah, so in Vault, you know, we have change, you know, engineering change orders. Think of it really as a way of documenting the process of when going, whether it's an initial release of a rev and documenting it, or, you know, using it as a way to document why we're going from rev A to B. And so the change feature in Vault gives you the opportunity to really track, you know, who requested it, what needs to be changed. You can assign people to actually do the work. You can assign people to review it. And really, it's good to keep in mind that it's really an engineering change process. In the past, we've seen people try to use that tool in ways that's not intended to do more PLM stuff. It's good just to remember that it's really a change management process inside of Vault.
Yeah, well, excuse me. We'll take a look at it and we'll see how it works in, combination with files or with items. We'll do items just because that's what we've been working on right now. But I think it was mentioned in one of the questions or one of the chats earlier, as far as, can you require it to work with your life cycles? And you can require it, right? You can make that decision. Again, it'll be one of the things that we talk about during the deployment process. We can change that option so that files or items cannot be moved forward in the release process unless it's part of a change order. So Jason touched on that. The initial release process, is that something that you want to happen only through ECN or ECOs, sorry, inside of Vault? You can go ahead and make that happen. So let's go back into Vault. I'm going to go ahead and close my items here. But ECOs live in this change order list. As you can see, I have a few ECOs going here. I've been on a backlog here. But something to keep in mind is ECOs live in this workspace, and also give you an option to see your work list, right? So we'll go over the different roles that happen here. But if there are any ECOs that require your attention, you will have a work list that tells you you have things to do. So that's something that's nice to keep in mind. Before talking, we'll go into the process here. And Jason mentioned something about trying to use ECOs for other, PLM functionalities here. That one of the things that kind of gets in the way of that, or forces customers to find creative ways around it, is the workflow that you have with ECOs. So the thing about ECOs and their workflows is it's rigid, right? This can't be modified. This ECO process has to be used as is, with the one exception of this check state. This check state can either be included or excluded, right? And sometimes what we use this for is that review state. So if it goes from one engineer to another engineer, it can go back and forth here. You'll see this little loop here, relatively quick and allow them to kind of go back and forth with those notes, as opposed to when this is not here, the review state here kind of forces it to go all like the long way around. So the workflow that you're seeing here is rigid. You can choose whether or not to include this check state. One thing to keep in mind is this check state will either be turned on or off globally. So for those customers that have multiple vaults, the check state will need to be either turned on or turned off for all the vaults that you have on the same server. So that's something to keep in mind. But going into an ECO, go ahead and create a new one here. And what I like to think of the general tab as is your cover page. All the relative information that you're going to need for this change order should be here, whether it's initial release, whether it's a change that came from a customer, things like that. All that information that an engineer will need to make the changes should be played here. Any properties can also be required in an ECO. You can add a list of properties here. You can add a list of values that you want for each property. That can be used for your cover page. Again, any information that's necessary here, due date, things like that. So you would set all this up here. Change order title would be, master change, rev everything to be. I'm going to make it due today, and then these fields here will be automatically filled in when I submit it. Records here, this can be left empty for now, but if I already know which items or which files need to be modified, I can add those here. I can search for these items in in my vault. So if I want to add my jet engine, hit OK, can add this here. And you'll see that it'll give me the state that it's currently in. If I want to go ahead, I can't make the change right now, but once I save it, I would be able to. This is where that enforcement of lifecycle change with ECOs comes in play. There's an option. I'm going to cancel here. I'm going to save this for now. Or no, I don't want to save it yet. But we'll come back to this, right? Right now, I have my item inside of the change order as released. Once I save it, I'll be able to change the lifecycle state inside of an ECO. We'll change the setting inside of my vault so that it can only change if it's part of an ECO, and we'll see how that affects it. Comments. This will be your history. We'll see in a bit that every time something happens on this ECO, a comment needs to be created. So every time it gets approved, every time it gets rejected, a comment gets created inside the ECO, which is really nice. You can see the timeline of your ECO as it goes through. Who made the approval, who put it into work, who put it into check. That'll all be captured inside of this comments tab, which is really nice, as well as comments can be added manually as the process goes. If somebody's reviewing it, if somebody makes a red line or anything like that, it can be added manually here. And then you'll notice that even though I have records here, it's an item. If I want to see the files themselves, it lists them out for you. It'll kind of give you a flat list of the files that you can then view or open. The other thing you can do here is attach or detach certain types of files that may not be part of the item. Maybe there's a red line that was done outside of Vault, maybe things like that. You can attach them to the ECO to keep track of them. And then the last thing here is routing. Like we talked about, this workflow is rigid, but that allows us to create routings that 90% of the time will be the same, right? So the same person will always approve it, same person will always close it, things like that. Each one of those people will have a certain role. That's where this routing tab comes into play. So if I have, in this case, if it's a manufacturing change, the responsible engineer I want here is my buddy Eric. He'll be the person that is in charge of it while it's in work. So he'll make the changes, he'll make the modifications, and then once he's done with those, he will be putting it into this check state, which then falls on the checker role, which in this case is my KETIV account, right? Each one of these roles here is necessary except for notification user. Notification user just means, at the end of the ECO, once it's closed out, they can get an email, they'll get a notification saying, hey, this ECO was all set. But responsible engineer in charge of work, approver in charge of this review state, change administrator, they're in charge of the change as a whole. They'll be the ones that put it from open into work, as well as approved to closed. So they are in charge. If it gets rejected, or during the review, if it gets rejected, they'll have the option of either sending it back to open saying, hey, the reason it was rejected is valid, you can make a change, or if the reason provided was, it's no longer needed by the customer, things like that, they have the option to cancel the ECO as a whole. So they have multiple responsibilities throughout the ECO process. And then checker. So checker is in charge of this state here. They're reviewing the drawings, reviewing the changes, making sure that on the engineering side, things are still valid and can be moved on to the review state where, maybe the customer's the one that's reviewing the changes and ensuring that everything is correct. But these routings can be set, again, preset in advance, making sure that, you have, I will, in this case, the default routing as administrator, I will be always the one that will do most of it. So in order to get through this process, I want to make sure that I have all the all the roles in order to move this through here. You'll also notice that unanimous approval is required for the selected routing. What that means is when it gets to review, you have two options. You can either have it be first come, first serve. So you can have multiple approvers and then the first one say yes, pushes it forward, or you can have it be unanimous, which means, in this case, I have myself as the administrator and Eric as the approver. Both of these are approvers. So that means that in order for it to finally be approved, both of us will need to approve it there. So I'll keep it as this one. I'll go ahead and save this here. But we'll go back to records and it's not gonna let me there, but typically, or here, I'll take a look at it here. If we look at this list of records, you'll see this option to change a state. What that means is we're able to change it from, in this case, release to work in progress. We would be able to do that through the ECO. And that's where, again, going back to that enforcement, if we go, I believe it's vault settings. Yes, so we have an option in here to restrict lifecycle state changes to ECOs. So I'm going to do it for items, right? So I set that setting up. So now if I were to come in here and try to change the state of this item to work in progress, oh, let me. I thought it would, forgot it doesn't. I'm going to turn off this administrator override. Again, I'm logged in as administrator. So now if I try to change the state, change state operation. So you can force it. You can enforce it with change orders. And even this jet engine model here, if I were to change the state, it wouldn't let me here. The reason, yeah, so it's controlled by a change order. So it would force me to change it through the change order. So if we go in here, and I don't think it'll let me here, but once we put it into this next state of open and work, it should let us change it there. So once the change order gets created and saved, right, the change administrator, whoever got added as change administrator in this, which in this case is me, can make the decision to either push it into open. What they'll do is submit it. So there's a couple ways you can open the ECO and submit from here, or if you right click on the ECO itself, you can respond and submit it. It'll give you the option. And like I mentioned earlier, this comment is necessary. So the title will tell you the ECO number and what's happening. So we're submitting it to open. We'll go ahead and hit OK here. You'll notice that it has a little red band or yellow band up here, and that is just letting me know that my emails aren't configured. But this can be easily configured on the server side. You just need a an email server that can send out these notifications. So this email here, we can't even configure it right now because I don't have it enabled, but will also be similar to this comment. It'll let you know what items are affected and what happened, why you're getting this notification. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. I submitted it to open. We can look at the status and you'll see that the state has changed. If we look at our comments again, you'll see that it was submitted to open, what time and what date and who did it. So that's what I meant by it'll keep track of your of the state of the ECO as it moves forward. You'll be able to make these changes. But in this open state, again, you want to make sure that as the change administrator, you want to make sure that all the necessary information is available, right? You want to make sure that everything is available in the in your cover page. What needs to be changed, what modifications need to happen, that the appropriate items are added to the ECO. So if I want to view and respond now, I should be able to come in here to status. And then once you submit it into work, you could, there's a couple of options here. You can force this. So there's this path you can take where, if it's a quick change administrator can make the modification, whether it be, that clerical error, things like that, you'll have that option to submit and force the approval and make it a quick ECO. Or if it needs to go through the whole process, you can submit it into work. And again, when you make changes to the process, you'll go ahead and create, you can add more comments and submit it forward. And then let's see if I can bring it over. Oh, it didn't come. What's nice, even if, like I mentioned, if you have an action on an ECO, it'll show up in your work list. But even if you don't have emails enabled, a small window will show up down here letting you know when an action becomes available. It'll pop up saying, hey, this ECO is available for you to work on. So if we come in here, we should be able to edit this, I believe. And then now that it's in work, it lets me change the state. So even though it was locked on my item master, I can make the changes to it now in the work state. So I'll come in here and just set it to work in progress. Of course, it's not. Oh, so I would need to add the rest of it. There's an easy way to do that. So if you say add related on this here, it'll pop up this window and you're able to kind of add the necessary things. Again, it's seldom, it's like literally never going to be the full item, the full assembly that gets revved at the same time. So you would pick and choose what items you want to add. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and hit just that one there. So again, once you hit related, it'll add all the items that you want. And now you can actually should be able to change the state. And then again, this is showing me all the things. So if I change the state in here, it'll let me work on each one as I want, as well as change the state back to review once I've made my modifications, right? Once you've made your modifications, you can put it into the review. And once you've put it into work in progress, once you put it into review, you can move it forward in the process. So again, I'll move it forward to check. And again, as we're keeping track of comments, you'll be able to keep track of when it went into each state. So we're going to go ahead and just keep going through this. We're going to approve the change order. Again, we're keeping track of what's happening here. And then the last thing here is we're going to go ahead and approve this as well. Oh, all right. Forgot about that portion. I meant to remove Eric as an approver, because if there's only one approver, I'll be the unanimous one. So here, if we look at ECO 12, I can respond as Eric and approve it. Again, the last approver will get a comment before it moves forward. Now, the last thing here is I'll log back out and log back in as administrator. If I look at this ECO, it's approved and it's locked. When I go to close this, add my comment, it'll pop up a window. So this is the portion where you would release your items. Unfortunately, it doesn't do this with files. It'll do this with items though. It'll give you a chance to come in here and put your items that you've been working on in released before it goes into the closed state. And that is how you would work with ECOs as well as items. they work a little bit better than ECOs with files, but they can still work in here. Anything, Alan, Jason, Bill, that you would add on ECOs here?
Yeah, that's a good reminder, is that the slight variation between ECOs with items that we saw the change state automatically pop up, but when you're using ECOs with file-based life cycles, you would do the same thing you did previously when it was in the work state. You would manually change the state to release prior to closing it. And so that is definitely a subtle difference. The other thing that's worth noting is, you know, Jose was able to do all of these steps because you could log in as different users, but to really wrap your head around the change process, you know, you usually would have like one person document what needs to be changed. You have an admin or someone, you know, like a power user that really has control over, is all the information correct? Is it all filled out? And then, you know, do I have the right end CAD user assigned so that when it goes into work, they have everything they need and know what they're changing? And then, you know, it's a different person that checks it. Sometimes it's the same person that checks it and approves it. It just depends. And so the ECO process really gives you an opportunity to really have anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 different people all doing a very different task to get an ECO closed. And the main thing to remember is that, you know, you don't want someone to be a approver if they spend 5 hours a day away from their computer. You know, you don't want someone holding up the process. And so it's good to just think about that, you know, as you're designing these things. And like, as I mentioned, you know, I like to refer what he just went through as the long way, which is great for going from Rev A to Rev B. But there's, you know, as you can see some of these paths, you have the fast track approval, which sometimes comes in handy for initial release if you don't need a second or third eyes on the file and you just want to, you know, quickly release something. So that's where the flexibility comes into, is there's really kind of like 3 different workflows through here. We have, you know, the long way, which is going through all of the boxes. You have the semi-short way where you're fast tracking off of the work. And then you have the super fast one where you go straight from open to approve. And so when implementing the ECO process, it's really important to document those 3 workflows, because you may use one of them, you may use all of them, but to be very clear about what kind of change process you're doing and which workflow, so that everyone's doing it the same way and you have the consistency.
Yeah, those are great points. I'll tell you, my favorite thing about the ECO is that they are attached to the document. So just again, growing up and having to fill out an Excel spreadsheet or a book that's this thick where people used to write things in an ECO, the stuff just gets lost. The fact that it's right there, the whole history, the tracking is fantastic. I will tell you also, previous life, get hired at a new company, first thing they give the new engineer is go do ECOs. We had Vault, we didn't have the engineering change out process. I go out on the shop floor, the guys say, hey, fix this. I come in, my supervisor says, why are you doing that? Well, the guys on the shop floor asked about it. Well, yeah, we told them we're never doing that. Stop it. So that afternoon, we turn on the ECO process and it gets approved. So about a week of non-value added of my time just disappeared because we put a little control, a little guardrail around the process, and it literally changed the way we ran our business. So I love the change order in Vault.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and like Alan mentioned, if you go into the items or even into the files, if you're adding them specifically to the ECO, when you go to the change order tab, which exists again in items and in files, you can see which ECOs it's a part of or has been a part of. You can even add to a change order and create them from the item master. If the ECO already exists, you can search for it, or you can create a brand new one off of it. If I go if I say add to new, you'll see that it automatically adds it to records. So ECO 13 here, you can go ahead and save it. We're not gonna finish it out, but you'll notice that under the change order tab, it's now added to the list, and it'll tell you what state that ECO is in within Vault. So, you know, you'll get quick information off of it. And again, you have this icon here that tells you whether or not it's part of an ECO.
Hey, Jose, not sure quite how we're on time, but we got a great question here in the chat regarding the new, well, actually regarding markup capability, and just thinking about the new markup capability in 23. If you want to maybe show a little quick peek at that from
Let's go ahead and
perspective.
go to change order here. What we're going to do is put this into open here, but submit. We're going to put this actually just to make this a little easier here.
So I wish we would have, thinking about this now, if we would have thrown up a poll and asked the majority of folks what versions that they're running on. I didn't think about that earlier, but in 22, we made significant changes in viewing in Vault. We expanded it in 23. In fact, Jose is gonna talk about here in the next session, but in 22 and beyond, you no longer need design review. So that requirement is gone. You no longer need design review for 22 and 23, unless you want to use it. If you love design review and you like that program and you have a workflow built around it, you can continue to use it, but it's not really necessary anymore from a viewing perspective or a markup perspective.
All right, so what we're going to do here is, and I'm trying to make sure, so we have the view here. Yeah, that's what I thought. So we're going to go to the item. We're going to change the state here just to make sure that we can
Do you have the new viewer turned on in 23?
Yeah, so
Okay,
I'm just going to go to.
Sweet.
And then here is when I'll update it. So I'll make sure that it has a visualization file. So you'll need that. You'll need to make sure that those are turned on when you're checking files in. Usually when you're making those modifications, you want to make sure that it's generating new visualization files. That way, when you go to mark it up or you go to view it, you can actually make those changes. So right now we're going to look at this model, and you'll see that it's powered by Forge. So that's the one of the biggest changes that makes these markups available. And these are through the thick client. So you know, making these modifications, you want to make sure that you can do that. But yeah, through the ECO or even through the File Explorer or the Project Explorer, you can mark up these tools now. So that's something that is very different now. Again, you can make these modifications. You can make text boxes, things like that. You can go ahead and make modifications to here. So you know, all these things you can actually save them as data, and that what that means is it'll attach it here to this file. So and when you do this through the thick client, again, it'll add it to the markup list of that file. You can do some markups in the thin client, which we'll see in a little bit as well. You can view the markups in the thin client, but when you save those, you'll have to save those as a separate image, and they won't be attached to the file itself. But when you do it through the thick client, you can save it to this here. And then if we go to the item and attach that to an existing, so let's see here. Should be able to add it to this. So now if we look at the change order, like Alan was saying, if we look at these files, we look at this blade. So if we look at it inside of here and we look at markups, I can see any markups that have been made by anybody else, or I can create my own markup in the tool as we're going through the ECO process. So that's one of the things actually is really nice. The markup tool used to be hit or miss in older ones. You can get it enabled, you can create those and save them as DW, I would believe it was DWFs in the past, and attach them to the ECO itself. But now they'll be attached to the files. You can save this as data. Again, is
Yeah, so we got a quick post in the chat at Claudio. Claudio, the markup is the same whether it's a drawing or it's any viewable in Vault. So Vault uses Vault still uses the DWF as the viewer of currency. So if you've got, as Jose mentioned, you create the visualization file. That visualization file is going to be a DWF or a DWFX, depending on your settings. But that's what we're putting the markups on. So it doesn't matter if it's a drawing or a part or an assembly file or an Inventor IDW or an AutoCAD DWG. Process is going to be the same.
Yeah, you would mark up in here. So as you can see, I already have a markup that I used for this drawing back in May, where I can create a brand new markup and save it to the drawing itself. So the tool itself will present itself to drawings or assemblies. If there's nothing else in here, we'll just review managing change. Again, that first tab will be your cover page, all necessary information that you want to you'll need throughout the process of the ECO. You want to make sure that it's available, filled out, and you can customize the properties that show up there. If there's any regions it'll affect, things like that, you can set those up inside that first overview page. You can choose your routings as you go. Who will be involved with this certain ECO. If it's an initial release, it'll always be these people. If it's a change, it'll be these people. You can always pick those right off the bat. And then adding the necessary items, the necessary files through the process, you can do that as well. And we went through the whole process in approving, releasing your items. Again, the final releasing of items window that popped up will only show up for items. For any files, they will need to be released in the approved state before closing out the ECO to make sure that those get released. Again, it's a rigid process, but you can leverage it to work as you need. And then I did mention it a little bit, but we're going to talk about thin client here. Now have Phil talk about how we can leverage the thin client.
Thanks, Jose. I think this is the biggest benefit of going to Pro as far as for a business, the thin client. I mean, because when you're talking about licensing and having people access Vault, the thin client is free. It's a web-based access tool, and you can have as many people as you want accessing release documents. So if you're using this in your manufacturing and you want the shop to access the release documents, we're not having to buy a thick client for every person on the shop floor. I'm able to give this to a lot, also to the sales staff, also for them. In my last company, we use this heavily for sales and marketing and for the shop. And they improved it in 2022. The thin client's come a long ways. There's a lot more features in it now than it had. And I think Autodesk is going to continue to improve the thin client going forward. It's a big cost saver. You think of how much Vault Pro costs you per license for the thick client, but when you start adding in all the users that can use the thin client, that cost per seat comes down really quick.
Yeah, I think Phil, your previous company you worked at, you had over like 1,000 people accessing the thin client, didn't you?
At least 500, between 500 and 1,000, just depended on, we had, at one point 13 divisions of engineering. So there was a lot of people accessing the thin client.
Yeah. So our friends with BASIC. So if you think about today, you have to have an authoring tool that has an entitlement to Vault in order to access that data that's in the Vault BASIC. And then our work group friends, you could buy a subscription for folks that maybe weren't in engineering, but they needed to access the Vault. Now with Vault Pro, our work group friends that have moved to Pro or have the entitlement to Pro, you get the thin client. So all of those folks that need to read or access the data, again, as Phil mentioned, it's free. There's no deployments needed. You don't have to install design review anymore after 22. So our friends that got Pro that are prior to 22, all the challenges that were around that design review and whatnot. So as Phil mentioned, we are continuing to invest in the thin client. When 23.1 comes out there's even more thin client improvements as well.
Yeah. We'll jump into what the thin client looks like there. Thanks guys for introducing that. But thin client again is through your web browser. So accessing it is it'll typically be HTTP // and then your server. So if you know that server name or IP address that you're accessing, that's what you'll type in here, and then Autodesk TC. So Autodesk thin client, TC is what it stands for, and you'll be able to navigate to your thin client here. Something to keep in mind is you'll need to be on the same network as your server. So in order to be able to see that thin client.
And one thing just to point out, so the old thin client prior to 22, it was Autodesk TC, and then the login. If you look at Jose, his address bar, he's put the name of the vault that he's accessing there. So if you are a Vault Pro user and you are migrating into 22 or beyond, you're going to need to adjust that address to contain the name of the vault in there.
Yeah, you'll see that it's hard coded here. I can't actually change it. Before you used to be able to pick it, but in this case, so if I say like I have one in there called vault for make, if I go to that address, it'll change the vault that I'm logging into.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, yeah, like Alan mentioned, some of our customers had to adjust for is, if a lot of the times our customers had this bookmarked, you're gonna have to edit that bookmark to make sure you're logging into the right.
Yeah. Used to be bookmarked as Vault TC, and now you have to put the vault, or you have to put the name of the vault that you're connecting to. That's
exactly, yeah. Which at the same time is pretty good, because that way, if you're giving this link to salespeople, whoever's accessing this thin client, you can guarantee that they're going to the right place, the right vault, by including it in the link. But similar to our thick client, you'll need a username and password to sign into our vault, into the thin client, or you can use a Windows account. You can use that domain account. But in my case, it's just going to be administrator. And I'm going to go ahead and sign into our vault. And for those of you on older versions of Vault, you'll notice that the interface is a little different from what it used to be. You do still have access to your files. You do still have access to items and change orders. So you can view all of these as you go. And that's talking to that value that Phil was talking about. Like, you don't have to purchase a license anymore to get visibility or give visibility to certain people. So, if certain people need to look at these ECOs, they may not be participating, but they'll still be able to see the process that's that's going on with those ECOs. You'll also have access to these items. So you'll notice that it, it'll give me information about these items if I want to see it. If I want to see the history, bill of materials, all that information is available through the thin client. Change orders that it's a part of, you'll be able to see that here. If I wanted to, properties, if I wanted to view this file or associated files in here, I can get to those, that location immediately if I wanted to view it. So it's all connected, which is really nice. Again, this is free functionality that you're getting out of Vault Professional that you can distribute to all your users. Again, if I wanted to see the markups, I can see those here. If you wanted to include someone in your process of marking up, whether it be a vendor or someone on the shop, things like that, they can create these markups and kind of view the files and kind of kick things off if someone out in the on the shop is doing this. So, I can go ahead and save this snapshot out on the floor, like, oh, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be modified. The one change, like I said, or one difference here that we go through with the thin client is while we were working in the full Vault Professional client, we were able to attach these markups to the file. When we're working in thin client, you'll need to save it as a PNG, save it as an image file, and kind of send that off to someone with access to the thin client, whoever you want to notify of these changes. So that's one of the differences there, just because thin client is a read-only viewer, so you won't be able to affect things inside of a Vault from the thin client. It is a viewer first and foremost. But again, you'll have access to all these things. And then for the admins that are on the call, one of the things you can do here is actually change the settings so that you only show released items or released files. So again, if you don't want anybody on the shop, if your shop is using this to access files, you don't want them to see anything that's not in a release state yet. You can do that, and it'll only show the released versions of things. You may have noticed that like some of these don't say that they're released, and you'll notice that when I open it, it also says it's not the latest or released. That is a flag letting you know, hey, this is going through an ECO. Maybe maybe I shouldn't be creating this if it's going through changes. It's a flag letting you know, hey, maybe I should hold off on using this. It still does give you the option of seeing revision A, which is the released one, but it's not letting me see, it's not letting me see revision B because it's not ready, it's not released. And then the same thing here. If I'm not seeing any files that are released, or yeah, I will once I log back in and log back out. Some of these settings need to apply or apply from the moment that they're changed and the next time they log in. So just keep that in mind when you're making modifications. Anything else you guys want to add on thin client?
Yes, I do. So it runs on any browser. Can be on an iPhone or an Android or a tablet, or the machine bolted to the pole in the middle of the shop floor. So that one of the things in the past when we required design review didn't run on iPhone or Android or things like that. So you have a lot more flexibility because this is truly on a browser, and you can use pretty much any flavor browser that you want. I'll tell you, Chrome works best, but if you use Firefox, that it works on that too, and Edge and things like that. So yeah, love. This is, to me personally, this is what thin client always should have been.
Yeah, for those of you that have been on Pro or still are on Pro on the older versions, you may have run into some issues with, like Alan mentioned, design review, having to use Internet Explorer, things like that. So with the newer version of thin client, you don't have to worry about that.
Yep, and something else kind of important from a security perspective. I think it was 21, maybe. We separated the read permission from the download permission. So what this means is you can have folks on the shop floor that can read documents, but you might not want them to download them. So from a permission standpoint, the read and download are now separate. So you don't have to worry about folks on the shop floor downloading things that maybe you don't want them to download. It could truly just be a view only.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look into how to set that up in the admin portion in a bit here. And yeah, that I know that was a big important thing for a lot of our customers. So just to review what we have, again, through the thin client, access through any browser, Chrome, Firefox, Edge. You can set up a release bias. So the users can only see the latest released version. Helps out a lot. Make sure that nobody's making things that aren't ready yet. And then visualization and markup, you can see those in the thin. All right. Let's go into the last leg of our training today. We're running a little, I think, long on time. But if you have a hard stop at noon, again, the recording will be available, and any questions that you have, we will be able to answer. Last session we talked, or before the break, we talked about change orders. We talked about items and bombs. It's a lot of what comes with Vault Professional. We talked about the thin client and the amount of value that it brings to your users, even without a full license available, and how you can share that. So again, if you have any questions on that, feel free to type them into the Q&A. And I know some of them go into chat too, but yeah, let us know. We'll be happy to help. The next portion we're going to talk about here is, administering your Vault in general, and the settings that we have and changes that you can make, and how they relate to, the workflows and the how the engineers use the Vault every day. So I'll let Phil take it away.
Thanks, Jose. I think this is critical. A critical piece to managing Vault is the administration of it. And it's just not the backend server, making sure the backups are running and all that stuff, but it's everything encompassing. And if you would go to watch our last KV8 that Jason and I and Jose hosted on why you need a CAD manager, I mean, this is where a CAD manager is going to pay off. It's because you can set up Vault and you get everybody to use it, but you also need somebody that's there monitoring and making sure everybody's following the same processes and procedures. Because if you don't, naming conventions will be all over the place. And then you're going to be calling us and asking us to rename all your files and get them all cleaned up. I mean, yeah, I think this is the most important piece of the Vault is the administration.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, we're going to look at certain things in administering the Vault, and these are things that we thought would be most important to cover on here. Especially since we talked about life cycles and the engineering process. So setting up that configuration, which is a big part. Again, we do offer this as a service. We walk through your process, walk through your workflow, and figure out the best way to have that configured inside of Vault. So we'll go through configuring that. Duplicate part cleanup. So like Phil mentioned, sometimes if you don't have people adhering to these standards and you didn't have the life cycles or anything configured, you may end up with a lot of duplicate geometry inside of your Vault. Some parts that get added under a different name but are identical to other parts. We'll go over how to clean that up and where you can see that. And then some reporting, which we involves those or can involve those save searches that we went over at the beginning of the Vault, and we can see what is released, what ECOs are open, things like that. You can create a report and export it. We'll go over how to do that, and then at the end we'll talk about server and replication, the important parts of getting that set up on a back end, and any questions you guys may have. So I know we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but Alan, do you want to talk about configuring lifecycles categories and revisions inside of Vault Pro?
Absolutely. So yeah, we just touched on it a little bit. There's when we think about, again, from our basic folks, we have folder level security. For our work group folks, we have folder level, file level, and then state-based security. So when we extrapolate that out and coming from the thin client, again, being able to have those users out in the shop and access data, some of the configurations through the lifecycle as well, give even more control over the administrators as to who can see what. So as Phil mentioned, this is kind of the backbone around Vault through the configurations, getting your categories set up correctly so that you have a nice, smooth experience. So probably a great refresher for our work group folks and our pro folks. And then our basic folks, this again is really the backbone of Vault and what gives you that that control and robustness that maybe you're not feeling on the basic side today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the first, typically when we're working with a customer, trying to figure out their workflow, trying to map that out, we want to make sure that we have that conversation early before we start configuring any of the categories or revisions or even the life cycles themselves, to try and map it out and get a clear picture of that. So there's a couple of different ways that we do that, but one of the ways that we do is through mapping it, literally mapping it out and working with our customers to create these states. Again, these states that you're seeing up on your screen are one of the default workflows, but if there's different transitions that need to be created, if there's different states that need to be created, it's easier to map this all out and kind of get a general understanding of what your workflow looks like with the different properties and the different permissions that need to happen at each state before we actually create this. So this is one of the things that we'll do, or we recommend you do before configuring anything inside of Vault, is map it out. Make sure that you have a clear understanding of your workflow, clear understanding of what states need to happen, what states don't, and where it can go from. Like, if you don't want it to go from work in progress into released ever, you can block off those transitions, but you want to make sure that you have a clear map of it before you go in. So again, when configuring these things, you'll need administrator privileges, and you'll know that you'll have them when you try to configure these things. If you go to tools, administration, these life cycles, categories, and revisions are all Vault specific. So like I mentioned, some of our customers have different vaults on the same server. These are some of the settings that will be Vault specific. So if you configure a life cycle in your prototype vault versus your production vault, it'll only affect whatever vault you're logged into and modifying. So you'll go into tools, administration, and settings, vault settings. And that's how you'll know it's Vault specific settings, because it only affects the one that you're logged into. For life cycles, categories, and revisions, you'll go to behaviors. So this is where the workflow portion of Vault is. And you'll see here that you'll have different areas to check in or to work in. So for life cycles, we'll go ahead and this is where you would map out your workflow. Again, some of these are here by default. Actually, all the ones that you're seeing here are here by default. So these are the ones that are created by Autodesk and included in Vault, and you'll see all the states for each lifecycle process or release process that you're seeing here. And again, simple, basic, flexible. It's just different complexities of your release process. I mentioned earlier something about purchase parts maybe only needing to be work in progress or released. They're easily reviewed. You can base your release process of those off of this simple release process. A lot of times we recommend that if your workflow is relatively similar to any of these, you still create a copy. So you can create a copy here and give it a name. So in this case, masterclass release process. And here's where part of the configuration already starts. So when you're creating a new lifecycle or a new release process, get to pick what it's related to. So whether it'll be related to items, you get to pick what kind of items it'll be associated to. Same thing with your files, right? These are typically, again, the two types of workflows that we work with in Vault. Yes, you can apply it to folders and some custom objects, but the majority of the time it'll be with item categories or file categories. So in this case, I'm going to create one for my engineering file category. So I'll work with that, and we'll make sure that it's related to this one. What this means is that anything in this engineering category has the option to follow this workflow. It won't necessarily mean it's forced to go into the workflow, but it's just available. And we'll see what that means as well in a little bit. But right now, masterclass is only available for engineering, right? Definition of security. How would you like these permissions to work with the files? And again, because you have different types of permissions, because you have folder permissions, because you have item permissions, because you have lifecycle permissions, this you can kind of force, like if you override object-based security, you can have the lifecycle kind of take full control of the permissions of the files or items if necessary. Otherwise, you can have it combined with different things. But by default, it's under combine, so we'll leave it under there. And then the last thing before we save it here, we'll see is the different types of states that we have in this workflow. So again, mine is pretty similar to what we're seeing here, but if you need to add a different state, you can go ahead and add as many as you want. You can make certain ones default again. So I can make a release state a default one if it's a standard or a purchase part. I just want it to automatically be released when it gets added into Vault. But if it's engineering category, typically you want it to be editable, you want it to be available to the engineers to make changes to them. So that's what's selected by default here. I'm gonna go ahead and hit apply here, which kind of saves my states. I can still make edits, I can still make add states to it, but these states here have been solidified for now. When looking at your workflow, you have all these states. If you create them from scratch, every state will be available. So that means work in progress will be able to go into every single state that you created by default. But if you created, if you make a copy off of like the flexible release process, there are certain states that Vault has disabled not states, transitions that Vault has kind of disabled by default. So we'll look at what those might be right now. So that's what this transitions tab is. This, like I said, any transition from one state to another, it could be available if you want it to be. But like we talked about, work in progress to obsolete, we usually don't want that to happen. So what you would end up doing is for each transition, you would want to make sure that the appropriate people can make it. So, engineers should be able to send it from work in progress to review, but only admins should be able to send it from work in progress to release. Again, these are things that you would discuss during the workflow process, making sure that you kind of capture this information so that when you come in here to configure, you already have your roadmap. You just follow it along to make sure that it matches what you've mapped out. But let's go ahead. For each transition, you would go ahead and edit the properties of each transition, and this is where you would add criteria and such for each individual transition. In here, if this transition was we want it to be available, but we wanted to say that the properties are all compliant, right? We saw that available during our examples. If properties aren't filled out, it won't let us move forward. This is where that was configured, right? Property compliance is the property that you'd be looking at, and the condition is compliant, right? So property compliance is compliant, just means all the necessary properties have been filled out and are available. So you would add this, and now this needs to be true in order for this transition to happen. So again, you would go ahead and set these things up here. This is also where I set it up earlier to need the revision to be numeric before it moves forward into released, you would set up those kinds of criteria here. Under actions, you have different types of actions depending on what this transition applies to. So if you have files, you have certain actions available to you, such as synchronizing the properties, updating the view when things are released. And then on the other side is you have other actions available for items and such. So, some may be available for items, some may be available for files, depending on the type of life cycles that you're following or creating. I would suggest switching over to that tab to make sure that you're configuring the right actions here. But one of the biggest ones and available for both items and files is bump primary revision. So again, we saw earlier when it goes from released back into work in progress, we can actually take a look at that specific transition. So when it goes from release to work in progress, we have an action that bumps the primary revision. You may have a different action. So when it goes from review back into work in progress, so something needs to be modified, you may be using secondary revisions. You may be using tertiary revisions. Those can be configured inside of the transition as well. So something to keep in mind is, if you're using secondary, tertiary, you can have Vault automatically keep track of those as well under actions. Custom job types allows us to run certain things as automation and such. Some of our customers have jobs specific to like the job processor that need to be run when files are released. Either creates a specific type of DXF, a PDF conglomerate of all the drawings, things like that. This is where you would add that on specific transitions. You would run, it would send this job to that job processor, and we've done that with a lot of our customers. And then the last tab here is security. Who can make this transition? So again, I don't want work in progress to obsolete to be an option. So instead, what I'll do is by default, it says there's no restrictions. I don't want that. I'll go ahead and add a group or specific user. If there's specific users that you want to bar from doing certain transitions, you can do that as well. But typically the best way to control transitions and permissions would be through groups. So in here, I would add everyone, and everyone is a default group inside of Vault. It includes every user inside the Vault, and I'll change the permission to deny. So what this means is anyone that tries to make this transition will, in fact, not have it available. It won't even show up inside of their menu. When we change the state, we'll see that this isn't actually available. So you would do that again for each state transition. For each state, you'll notice that it has an option to go from the state that we're in to the states that exist for you, but it also has the option to, you'll notice the arrow from each state that it might come from. So if we don't want it to ever come from quick change to work in progress, which I believe should be blocked. Yeah, it's already denied here. We don't want that ever to happen. We want quick change to only be able to go back to released. So those are the things that you'll want to block in here under transitions. The other thing you'll want to modify here is the security in each state. So this is again where, for things that are in review, we want people to be able to see and download, maybe not even download, depending on the permissions that you want to give. Like Alan mentioned in the thin client, this is where you would dictate those permissions. For review, we want people to be able to see the files, but not modify or delete them. You would, again, have mapped this out previously. What groups are we breaking our users into? What permissions will they have at certain states? You would already have that roadmap and just apply it here. If you are applying this life cycle or this workflow to items, you may want to apply the security to the files. We saw that this could be an option. In this case, it's a file-based lifecycle, so we don't have to worry about it. But you can associate the security here. And there's a couple of options in here as well. You can have it apply the state permissions, which we have configured out here to be identical, or you can apply custom permissions, or even overwrite depending when it goes into the state. So just remember that whatever permissions you select will apply to your files if you're working with an item lifecycle here. And then the same thing would be for folders. If you're applying these lifecycles to folder specifically, that can carry down over to the files as well.
Jose, if I could, before you do that, if I could throw something in there real quick. Notice that we've got allow blank. If Jose goes up there into where the modify is, there's also a deny. The blank is no. It's a pretty firm no. The deny is
Absolutely.
an extremely hard no. Unless you have a really good reason to explicitly say deny, my suggestion would be don't do it. It's a lot harder deny than probably most people realize, and it can affect areas that you might not expect it to unless you really understand the inner workings of a very robust security model. So if you're having some things in your Vault, our Vault Pro friends or Vault Workgroup friends, and something's not behaving as you expect it to, go make sure that there's no deny permission set somewhere. Turn those off first. Because I'll say, probably Jason, you get a lot of calls on those too. That's probably the number one cause of something not behaving the way it's supposed to do in Vault, or as you would expect. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. One of the things, so just to elaborate a little bit more on that, in this state, what we have is the group of everyone and a user named Eric, right? If I were to deny here, Eric is still part of the group everyone. So even though he was allowed to modify, the deny in the group would take precedent. It would, if he tried to check that out or make changes, it would tell him he can't. So that's just something that, like Alan said, to keep in mind. And unless you really, really want to, you need to use that deny, we would recommend to kind of stick with the blank here. Control. You'll notice that we have a couple of options here, released and obsolete. So we have a release state and an obsolete state in this case. They are protected in certain cases or in most cases. So this is a release state. When files are put through the lifecycle process and a PDF is created, unless the PDF is going into a release state, or sorry, unless the file is going into a release state, it will not create the PDF. That's one of the things one of the checks that we have there, or that the job processor will have. So you'll want to make sure that this file is marked as released. The other thing is the controlled versions. So like I mentioned earlier, you can have a history of a long list of versions of the file. Maybe it's checked in, checked out multiple times in work in progress and such. You can purge some of those out there. Typically, it doesn't get rid of a lot of versions, but in some cases, you can. What controlled versions allows you to do is protect the ones that are important to you. In this case, released versions. Those are very important to all of us. We want to make sure that they never get deleted by accident. They never get removed from the vault. So in this case, you would control all of these released versions. What the other thing you can do for work in progress is first and last. So let's say you have a list of 30 work in progress versions that happened in a row. It was modified, on July 1st and July 7th, but 30 versions were created in between that span. What first and last means is the first time it was put in work in progress, that gets protected. So you can see the initial state of the file when it was first put into work in progress. And then the last version of it in work in progress before it moved out into review. It'll keep track of those two versions every time. And that's what first and last means. Anything else, if it's not related to another file or not needed by another file, it'll be able to purge it. And then the last, similar to first and last, but the last version of that file created within that state will be saved. And then of course you have none. Any differences here, you'll be able to, it kind of gives you a small blurb here of how it's taking care of those controlled versions. And then the last thing here is comments. When you're moving into each one of these states, so you'll see review, release, they all have different comments. You have the ability to have different comments pop up when you make that state change. And by default, you can set one of these to pop up every time. You can kind of control what pops up every time you make that state change.
And then maybe the last thing is Jose mentioned, these are out of the box. But maybe you guys don't use the term released. Maybe you use approved or as built or something like that. So you can change the names of these as well, so you don't have to use our nomenclature if something fits better in your line of business.
Yep. So right there, if we don't use release like you mentioned, we can change the state name here to approved. And then as well as the color, we mentioned those little arrow wheels that pop up inside of the project explorer as it goes from state to state. If you don't want to actually see the state name, but you know the colors, you can change what color shows up for each state.
Yeah, colors is new in 23.
Correct. So that's life cycles. These are the workflows again that you would have mapped out, you would have available to use within your vault. But in order to have them apply to your files, I made this available to my engineering files. You'll see that that my files here are all in engineering, but they're using my flexible release process. How do I set that up? How do I make it do that? Well, that would be through the category definition. So again, in behaviors, you would go down to categories, right? So these are the different categories that exist within the vault. You have folder categories, item. We're going to work with file categories here, but we'll go down to my engineering category. By default, we typically recommend using a base category. So this base category you'll see under life cycles, revisions, and properties. There's nothing really limiting this file that's in a base category from being viewed. So there's no life cycles to block people out. There's no revisions to kind of automatically apply a revision to it. So this is kind of a catch-all of your categories. So typically we recommend leaving that one alone. But for your other categories like engineering or assemblies in your items, we recommend applying your workflow to them. In this case, you'll see that under my engineering category, I have 3 different life cycles that I might be able, or release processes that I might be able to apply. Masterclass being the one that I just created, as well as none. So if you don't want it to be controlled by a life cycle, like my jet engine that I kind of removed from the life cycle states, you can always have that option as well. But in here, you would apply the workflows that you want. If you hit assign, it'll take you to the list of different workflows that are available in the vault, even if they're not assigned to this category. I could make them assigned to this category. So if I want this simple release process, I can always add it here and keep it in there. The other thing I can do is set which life cycle or which release process I want as default, so that the next time a file gets added to this category, it'll automatically go into that release process. In this case, so if I want to make my master class the default one, I can either double click in that area or select and hit default here. That means any file that goes into this category from now on will get added to this lifecycle. With that being said, it will do that for new files. If an older file is already in a lifecycle and you move it to this category, it won't replace the old lifecycle. You'll have to manually go in and make a change like that in the files themselves. So this will apply to new files or files without that are already involved but don't have a lifecycle associated to them. The other thing you want to configure in categories here is the revision that it wants to use, or it can use. In this case, again, I have it to default by alphabetic format, but we also have a numeric format available to them. You can assign the different types. For those of you that use ASME and can't use O or I, you'll go ahead and use ASME as opposed to alphabetic. If you have your own custom revision, you can always create it. So if you hit edit here, if you hit edit in the revisions or edit in the life cycles, it'll take you to those areas within the administrator workspace. And here it'll give you so you have the 3 default revision schemes that come with Vault, but you'll also be able to either copy or create a brand new one. And in here you can create, depending on your revision scheme, you can create, you can dictate whether it'll be what it'll follow in the primary, secondary, or tertiary revision scheme. So you can set that up in here. And once it's saved and available, you can assign it to specific categories. The last thing we'll look under categories here is actually properties and what properties apply to each file, each category, each file in this category, excuse me. So you can assign specific properties that already exist to this category, or again, if you hit edit, you can go into the property edit window, create your own properties in here and assign them to your life cycles. So, if I want this manufacturing number property to apply to engineering, I would come in here, assign it to files, first of all, and assign it to engineering, and that'll make it show up inside of that category. I'm gonna go ahead and close out of there because I don't want to make that change right now. But again, the list of properties, the list of revision schemes, the list of categories that these workflows will apply to will all be things that you should or will have to discuss before you come in here and configure it. Ideally, you want to come in here, configure it, and then test it to make sure it's doing what your roadmap is telling you it's supposed to do. That you log in as different users to make sure, hey, this user is not supposed to be able to send it to obsolete, but I can. How do I fix that? How should I go about it? But you would go in here and configure those on the back end. Coming back in here, let me go ahead and take that. The last thing we want to look at here is rules. So categories go in hand with rules. You'll see that they're grouped together. So if we look at rules here, how do I dictate what files go into what category? And it's a list of rules. So here I have my file rules. So any file that gets added to Vault, it'll go through this list of rules to see if it matches any of it. The first is design representation. So if it's a PDF or things like that, it'll check to see if it's one of those and add it to this category. And again, we saw the categories themselves apply workflow, revision, properties to it. So this is how you would control which files automatically go to which location. So for parts, again, depending on the criteria, if you have standard parts or and such, you can set up your own rules. But if I'm any inventor parts that come into the Vault, I want to make sure that the extension is by IPT. They go into engineering, same thing with assemblies and same thing with drawings or even DWGs. So those are my basic rules in here. By default, it won't come with any rules other than design representation and default, I believe. Those are the only 2 rules that will follow. For engineering and all those other categories, you'll have to set your own criteria. But in here, essentially what you would do is you would select the property that you want it to look at when it puts it in, when it checks it into Vault. So let's say if you want description, should be in here. So if you want description and then contains, let's say engineering. So maybe your descriptions all contain engineering when you check them into Vault and they have to go into that category. You can add this condition into the list. And this is exactly like our find tool where it has to match both criteria in order to go into this part. So you can use that to your advantage. to kind of be more selective as to which category files go into, or even items if if you're using that as if you're using that to do your workflows. But I'm going to go ahead in here and remove that extension. Whoops. So here we're going to recreate it. File extension contains IPT and add that here. So now it'll be pretty similar here. So, and again, you want to use these to your advantage because it automatically applies that workflow and applies those revisions and properties to the files that you add into Vault. Anything to add on that, guys?
No, I think that was great. And kind of looking at the time, we've got about 17 minutes left.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and jump into the next thing here. So again, this is what we went over here: creating states, how to apply it to files, creating those criteria and rules for those categories, and then the default properties and revisions that get applied through those categories as well. Next thing we're going to touch on here is duplicate part cleanup, and I'll have Jason walk us into that.
Yeah, this is a really great tool, especially if you haven't had a CAD manager really keeping tabs on what's been getting checked into Vault. You'd be surprised at how many like files are in Vault, whether someone's used copy design too many times and haven't cleaned up. But when you start using this tool, it basically looks at a geometry level, how many files are identical and maybe to have a different name or in a different folder. Because one of the core tenets of any PDM software like Vault is, be able to reuse content, and you can't reuse content if you can't find what you want. And it's, and so this tool helps you kind of clean up the Vault, and identify parts that should be, a library component, especially if multiple assemblies are all referencing them. And so this tool really helps you just get a grasp of how many parts are identical in Vault with different names so that you can start to work on the cleanup process.
Yeah, definitely. Like Jason mentioned, if you can't reuse parts if you keep making new ones. So this will help you clean that up. So it's actually its own kind of area here. You'll see that I have a 13.8% duplicate ratio. And that's, I've told it, I set this up in the background to kind of tell it where to look. The way you would do that again is through tools, administration, and Vault settings. And then duplicate search settings here, you can configure which folders it's looking in. So if you configure that, I told it pretty much to look only in my designs folder. And that's where it'll have to index. So when you first turn this on, it won't automatically just know what geometry everything is within your Vault. So when you first turn this on, it'll send some jobs to your job processor. It'll send some jobs there to index the files that you told it to. And that's when it goes through the geometry search. So, if you're only looking within a certain project or a certain area of your Vault, this is where you would pick that. If you enable it or disabled it, by default, it'll be disabled. So just make sure you're picking the area. Maybe, if your Vault is 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, you don't want to go through the whole Vault at once. Maybe you want to concentrate on, newer designs, newer projects, things like that. You can select the folders that you want to work through. Once it goes through the indexing process, though, what you can do is actually view the report of those duplicates. So that's what's nice about this this duplicate dashboard is you can actually view a report of the files that it found and then use it as a checklist, right? Right now it found 24 different duplicate geometries that I can go through, and it tells me what they're named and where they are. So maybe, it might be the same geometry and just different names, different description. We can search through those parts. You can open them up in Vault, in Inventor, or even view the DWF inside of Vault and compare them maybe they are identical and you can actually replace them within Vault. So this report can be, printed to a PDF and such to keep track of. And once you search for those files, you can do a couple of things. You can either, where is it? Should be where is it? Replace option here under edit. If it's the exact same geometry, if you changed it, Vault will be able to maintain those relationships within Vault and Inventor, or you can open up the assemblies that it's a part of and do a replace from Vault in there as well. So, maybe they're oriented differently, things like that. You can do that more specifically through Inventor or in mass through Vault. Something to keep in mind here, though, is if they are oriented differently, it'll give you a warning. It'll let you know, hey, some relationships or mates may not be resolved correctly. Next time you open up the assembly or next time you open up the subassembly, you might need to do some fixing there. But again, very good tool to kind of clean up your Vault. Ideally, again, you're setting it up properly the first time with the CAD administrator, making sure that your standards are being followed to make sure that you don't have you don't run into situations with duplicate geometry. Again, enabling in a Vault, you'll have to go through that, make sure that it indexes those files in the area that you told it. You'll be able to have a report based on the different geometries. It'll separate it up into groups for you. And then you'll be able to use that replace feature in Vault or go through individually each assembly and changing them as you go. Reporting.
This one, I'll be honest, I overlook it all the time. I forget that we have it in there. But it is baked into the Vault, and it is a great way to get a snapshot of what's going on in your project. But again, I know we're getting a little tight on time, so that's all I'm going to say on that. But it's in the box in Pro, so absolutely check it out. And let's see what Jose has to show us here.
Yeah, excuse me, definitely. So inside of Vault reporting, again, we put it on the admin side. It can be used by the users as well, but on the admin side, just because you can export different statuses of different things. If you want to know what files are in work in progress, at what time, you can export a report about that. If you want to know which change orders are in work, you can export that. So typically what you would do is you would create a search that gives you the items that you're looking for. So in this case, change orders, I want to know what change orders are currently in work. So if I add that to my criteria, I can find that I have 2 and when they're due, right? From here, I can run a report of the 2 things that are of the files or ECOs that I have and export it to a report here. By default, it shows me a duplicates report because that's the last one that I used when I did the duplicates dashboard. But if you click on that button there, it'll take you to the default report templates, and you'll see that you have various to pick from. So if I want to, show my ECOs by state, I can go ahead and run this report. And you'll see that when I hit OK, it'll give me my ECOs here. I had already narrowed it down to work state ones or work state ECOs. So my pie graph doesn't show me. But if I remove this and search again, I have a big mix of different ECOs here. So if I run that report again, now you'll see that it's broken it up into different levels or different sections of that pie chart, and you'll be able to kind of keep track and know, like, hey, this one's due today. Why is it still in work? It should be in review, kind of thing, and allows you as an admin to keep track of that. Same thing with if we were looking at files, just do a find now. I can run a report on my files and say by lifecycle state on that. And similar to the ECO one, I'll have the state of all my files in the different states that they're in. So you'll see here that this one's page of 11. Again, you could add different different criteria to your search to kind of make this reporting feature, give you the exact information that you want in here. And then again, if you want to save this, you could print the layout. Or sorry, you could print and save it to a PDF if that's what you need, or paper if that's what you really need as well. But like Alan mentioned, reporting gets overlooked a lot of the times. You kind of forget it's there, but I think it's a very powerful tool for admins to keep track of certain things. The templates themselves, again, you have the default ones that come with it, but you can also modify them to kind of fit your format. But typically the default ones are pretty good at giving us what we need. Yeah, like I said, default templates can set up the criteria to narrow down the information that you get with those save searches. Again, you can run them on save searches if you always want to run the same report, but run it, weekly and such. You can run the save search and run a report off of it, and then modify the templates as you go. And then the last thing we're going to touch on here is server and replication. So I'm going to have Jason take this one.
Yeah, this is such a great topic, and something that's overlooked a lot with Vault is that Vault can really scale with your business. Right now we've been just talking about one Vault server at one office, but Vault has the ability to do at least 2 different types of replication. It's known as an AVFS server, where you just get a local file store at another office, and that really helps with check-in, check-out performance. And then there's what we refer to as full SQL replication, where you have 2 identical Vault servers, 2 SQL servers, and they communicate. And so, you can have 2 sites connected. I've seen 8 sites fully replicated. You can mix and match replication with AVFS servers. I've seen customers get way past 15 AVFS servers. So you can really just grow, and it just depends on where you need the data. And it works across continents. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Phil dealt with how many servers before coming over to KETIV, so.
We had 2 sets of fully replicated, one in our corporate office and then one in our DR location. And then we had 29 AVFS servers replicated between US and Mexico.
Yeah, so
and the AVFS is the greatest thing in the world, especially if you have an office that doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. Once you get the files there,
yeah,
and they're populated, the only thing that's happening is change data, and then the only call that's going back to the main server is an SQL call, which is really tiny. So it really helps. We had offices in some really remote locations in the US that didn't have high bandwidth at all.
Yeah, exactly. So, having a local store of those files, I bet you helped a lot and save time. Yeah, we've yeah.
Well,
so
now that we're hosting in the cloud, we're eliminating that even to where we can host the customer's Vault in the cloud, and each location is pointing to the cloud and not having to have replication anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, again, sir, it is available with Vault Professional, but if this is something that you're hearing and you're like, I struggle from that, like we have users in the next city over that have to VPN in and such, like replication can help alleviate those things. Kind of not one of the things that we can easily show in here. Here at KETIV, we have our own vault, so we work in isolated vault here. But like Phil mentioned, we have Azure vaults that we all use and are able to connect to for replication. And then we can work with that. And some of our customers, have that as well. They have offices in South America, in Asia, and in the US that we're able to connect. But typically, the things that we're talking about when talking about the Vault server, whether it be an upgrade, now that you're going from Vault Workgroup, 2021, 2022 to 2023, or replication is Windows Server OS, making sure that that's up to date with the newest version that you want to go to, the SQL type that you're working with, especially if you're working with replication. Typically, if you're just starting out with Vault, you can get away with using SQL Express, which is the free version of SQL. But once you start looking into replication, you have to make sure that you're using SQL Standard to make sure you're replicating there. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then drive space, which like Phil mentioned, if you're copying files over from one site to another, you want to make sure that the site you're copying to has enough space and is as big, if not bigger than the one you're copying from. And Vault data management customers, Vault as a service customers, this is something that we take on our end, making sure that these are that the servers that we're hosting for you qualify for the next version and the version that you're going to. So if it's something that you want off your plate, it's definitely something that we can take care of for you. Anything else, guys, that you think I missed on replication or server there?
No, I think you're good.
All right, and then the last one here that we have is gateway, which I'm going to have Alan talk on.
So this is one of my favorites. This is a new feature. It allows users outside of your organization, because again, typically Vault is on-prem and it's behind your firewall, safe and sound. If you need to get to it, like a lot of us did when we started working from home, we had to go through a VPN, and that's not the case anymore. And the other benefit is it is fast. Everything I'm hearing from our customers across the entire spectrum is the folks that are using Vault Gateway is it is far faster than the typical VPN experience that they've had. So I think Jose is going to show you how to set it up.
Yeah, definitely gonna look on the server here. So just to touch on it again on the gateway things that Alan talked on was working from home. A lot of us are working from home now, and getting onto the Vault without having to worry about the VPN, having the VPN drop in the middle of a check-in, which we've seen. We've had to troubleshoot that recently. Would be nice being able to connect to that. There's 2 gateway servers that you can set up, which we'll look at in a bit. On the ADMS side, US East and a Dublin, Ireland one. And then if your server itself cannot connect to the internet, you can always enable a proxy server. But on the ADMS side, the configuration would happen through the tools. So you'll need administrator access to the Vault, as well as access to the server that the Vault is hosted on. And then you'll go into tools and manage the Vault Gateway. You will need a service account. So in this case, I am using my personal KETIV account that as a service account, which it'll need access to a Vault Pro license in here. But when you configure this here, this will be empty by default. I can actually, let me go ahead and delete this here. So by default, you will see this gateway as blank here. Again, I mentioned if your server itself cannot connect directly to the internet or to the web, you can set up a proxy server that allows it to kind of ping out and in if for added security there. But in my case, I can connect fine. It'll be empty here. You can configure. It'll pop up this gateway configuration here. Again, I will pick the one that would work best for me. In this case, US East would work best for me. If I want to add any notes, you can as to who you want to use this gateway and why it's being set up. Add those notes here. and then add that service account. Like I mentioned, in this case, it'll ask me to sign in with an Autodesk account. I'm gonna go ahead and use my KETIV account. Nobody look at my password, please. I'll go ahead and sign in here. So it'll assign that service account here. So if I set up any other gateways, I believe it does link those together. But if I hit OK here, it'll go ahead and set up this gateway, which is really nice. You'll see that it'll give me a host name once it's done here. And this host name is what you would use to log into Vault. So if you're working from home and you don't have access to the server directly, this is what you would use instead. You would, you can copy this and send it as instructions to your users. They would log into this, they would paste this server under the server here. So if I paste this here and then log in, this is one of the things that you want to make sure too. In order to increase security on working through the gateway, there is a password requirement for the as far as how long and complex it has to be in order to log into Vault. Fortunately, my blank password is not secure enough, which luckily it's how you want it. But you'll see that it actually tried to connect me to that server. If I hit that Vault button, it'll see and find all of my my vaults related to that server. So if I were to change the complexity here of my password, it would let me log into that through the Vault gateway, even if I wasn't connected or to the network. So you'll be able to use that, and then the complexity, again, you'll be able to work with your users to make sure that that password is complex enough. Maybe it helps you regulate that as a CAD administrator, make sure that, hey, nobody has blank passwords, or makes them extra secure.
Yeah, so and we didn't cover Vault Mobile today, but Vault Gateway does work with Vault Mobile. So you can have that iPad or Android phone out on customer side or wherever that case may be, and access the Vault Gateway and access the Vault through Vault Mobile as well. So
yeah,
very nice feature.
Yeah, that was a lot to cover here in 4 hours. And again, any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to KETIV support. It'll make it to us. We'll be able to answer questions. If you want to work on configuring your Vault, making sure that even if you already have Vault and Professional in place, maybe there's certain features that you would like to enable or work and configure more precisely, we can do that as well. And then one more reminder here that Autodesk University has registration has opened. So it's in New Orleans. If you want to go to NOLA, go ahead and check that out. Anything else that you guys want to add or cover?
I posted the link to the how-to video on how to do an in-place upgrade from workgroup to pro in the chat. So if anybody's looking for that, I posted that a little while back. Just got another one.
Yeah, it might have just went to the panelists. I'm not sure if everyone got to see that. It scrolled by pretty quick.
I can repost it out there. The link to the how-to video, and then somebody was asking when this video will be up. I'm not sure when this video will be available, but I'm pretty sure marketing has everybody who signed up, and we will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there will be a notification when the recording's available.
Yeah.
So people will
send it to everybody. The link to the how to do the upgrade from workgroup to pro.
Then I'm going to post in the chat as well, just kind of the last thing. If you're not a member of our feedback community, inviting you to join. It is kind of the beta portal place. and you can kind of get a peek and see what's coming around the corner. There is an NDA that gets signed, but other than that, there's no cost or time commitment to it. 23.1 is going to be released soon, so lots of new features coming up in there as well. But if you're not a member of the feedback community of Autodesk, would love to see you in there. Lots of amazing stuff coming down in the future. So appreciate it. It was great. Jose, fantastic job. But it's hard to cherry pick all the fun stuff that we can do in Vault Professional. It was the fact that you managed to pack it all in 4 hours and 7 minutes is amazing. My hat's off to you, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Jose.
Well, thank you for supporting me on the call. It's always kind of rough being on these calls by yourself. So thanks guys for jumping on. All right, I think that's it. Like I said, you guys will probably get a link or definitely get a link from marketing when this thing is available. But till next time, see you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
See you guys.